Alright, we're live. While we're waiting, where's the thing? Do I have the thing anymore? There we go. There's the thing. Welcome to the second to last 100 stream of all time. Streams up. Miko's not here, so he's gonna miss the first half of the analysis video, which might be the only half of the analysis video, depending on how much of this fucker I can tolerate. Because I don't know anything about this video. I don't know anything about this fucking video. I don't know if this guy is stupid. I don't know if he's, like, tolerable in any capacity whatsoever. We're just gonna watch this together. I also don't know if Twitch will actually tolerate just watching a YouTube video on Twitch. I don't know how they do watch-alongs. Oh, my fucking can. There you go. There's your can. But if we get like a stupid little complaint about it, I can just switch to Nimble. It's not that big of a deal. I'm only really doing this one on Twitch as well, just for the sake of, like, it's easier for Zarp. I don't know. I guess can Zarp even upload? It's we're literally. I guess it's like commentary. It's creative commentary over someone else's video. It's probably fine. All right, let's fucking start. Hopefully this is not gonna fucking kill me. I'm gonna be pausing constantly in this fucking video. That's why it's not only is this 5 hours, but it's probably gonna be longer. Anyway, let's go. That's not it. There, here. Play the thing. Yeah, it's art. Welcome to art. Please do not fucking be telling me this guy's gonna be comparing this to Hamlet.
Stories are one of the oldest surviving human traditions. Tales are told, recounted, revised, and iterated upon over and over again through millennia.
This is not a good sign, Georg. This is not a good start, Georg.
That the love letters of trope and parody stand upon pillars of reference material so ubiquitous that we sign away their foundational pieces to the nebulous culture over the specific art. Even with the absurd wellspring of history and ideas to pull from before considering the translation of personal, ongoing lived experience, creating and telling stories can remain challenging. Self-doubt in a perceived lack of original thought, inability to express ideas, or simple formation of coherent and followable plot lines can drive interested people away from the multimedia activity.
How's that, Metro?
Childish innocence and obliviousness gives way to social awareness. Removing aspects of difficulty from storytelling presents an avenue for new contenders to enter the ring, hence the prolific nature of fanfiction. Establishing a tale with existing elements from another story, in any combination of plots,
I could have not done an analysis video. I could have just watched it myself.
Any expectation that these elements of derivation be made more subtle offers opportunities for the flexing of a creative muscle. What ifs and this buts become a sandbox to play with expression through words and dialogue in a format more narrative than the art of poetry. Prose provides a different set of rules of canon that are just as flexible and nebulous as the rules of storytelling have been since their inception. An alternative way to alleviate the pressure of storytelling is through collaborative effort. For the past few years, I've found myself around a table with my friends anywhere between...
This is 100 lines. It's just taken him 10 years to get to the point that telling stories is hard.
Games. Whether I've been watching my players struggle...
I don't know why he's purposely blurring the background,
outer-world planets in the sci-fi world of Lancer, or wrestling with the divine influences behind an approaching fantasy world war as vampire valley girl Beatrice Toehopper Sunscale from the other side of the screen, my friends and I have been creating and sharing stories with each other and establishing shared thematic canons of ideas that resonate with us. Even characters that never reach the table, such as my Lancer pilot Grimmy Tiniclay, explored ideas of isolation and emotional barriers in ways that create a shared tale between me and the potential game master. There is a progeny of options between the tabletop role-playing game and a linear story that emulate this idea of collaborative storytelling,
Welcome,
Choose Your Own
Miko.
Adventure
I thought you
novels
weren't
and
going to be here. What happened to your
comfortably
Digimon?
operated in the same realms of fantasy and sci-fi that TTRPGs have since their migration out of the wargame sphere.
This
In
is
return
not a
for
good
the
start.
author gaining more control over the narrative and characters at the cost of agency of the reader, Choose Your Own Adventure tales gain the benefit of enhanced structure and not suffering long-term consequences at the hands of ad-libbed, improvised decisions a game master may have to make at the table. The clunkiness of cascading consequential non-choices.
This is like 100 likes.
As in the,
Doesn't show
if you've
anything.
acquired the skills included, turn to page 19, otherwise turn to page 31, was later alleviated through the methodology of interactive electronic entertainment. To cut the verbose bullshit, video games are an extension of the Choose Your Own Adventure novel. This is most blatantly true in the realm of text-based adventures, which are, in essence, Choose Your Own Adventure novels that expect the reader to input their own prompts, drawing a curtain where the paperback previously broke the fourth wall by naming specific page numbers. No longer
really
could the
lacking
player
Charlotte
glimpse
Bloom right
endgame
now.
spoilers as they flicked through the book. Now they had to grapple with the pseudo-language structure of finding the correct methodology to communicate with the computer. Modern-day applications in the form of dialogue trees, event flags tied to key items, and alignment systems that
Why
lead
are
to
we just-
endings
why
all
is
have their feet
SMT4
rooted
why is
in the
SMT4 your
origins of
example?
audience agency and storytelling.
Why SMT4 3 times?
The nature of audience agency in stories has created wellsprings of questions authors have explored and grappled with throughout literary history.
I get what it's trying to do.
Andrew
It just
Hussey's own
takes
style
10
frames
years
its
to get to the
storytelling through
point.
the lens of text input adventures. Grappling
Like, it can't. Okay, I'll pause that. Like, I get what he's trying to go for. It's just you really didn't need to spend 5 minutes to get to the point. It could be worse. It could be the action button video of that one visual novel where it took him 2 hours to get to the point.
with themes of predestination that clashes and ripples with the early webcomics usage of a user suggestion box for prompting character action. Kotaro Uchikoshi's Virtue's Last Reward explores the idea of a branching narrative only being made cohesive by exploring all paths. An idea most beautifully summarized in-game by a comparison to the inability for a termite to understand the massive relative scale of its nest. Kotaro Uchikoshi was also heavily involved
Yes, this is
in the
not how
creation
he's
of
just using
TV
that as an
series games
example.
as The 100 Line Last Defense Academy.
Holy shit,
A
it's the
visual
game.
novel with strategy RPG elements, co-directed by Uchikoshi and Danganronpa series writer and designer Kazutaka Kodaka. 100 Line marketed itself as having 100 unique, original endings that each offered a satisfying conclusion to its narrative.
That's
While
the
of the
biggest
100
line.
endings not all managed to meet this mark, the wellspring of options and how they're accessed present a unique set of answers to the questions audience agency has presented in storytelling. To create this series of endings driven by player choice, the writing team on 100 Line had to take an approach to narrative construction that strays from the storied path. With the exception of a more linear anti-colonial narrative approach to understanding 100 Line, the only way to access 100 Line's more nebulous concepts of agency and its plethora of themes is to disregard a learned understanding of how to read stories. We're going to bastardize the term Death of the Author and ignore Kazutaka Kodaka's pleas to stop once we find an ending that satisfies us, and instead use the concept of Death of the Author correctly as we explore what each and every route of 100 Line has to offer in order to understand its broad metatextual ideas.
You must become exceptional. I'm getting a really bad feeling he is not going to properly talk about how much stupid fucking shit is in this. He is probably not gonna talk about how the fucking bees. We're not gonna get an answer even in this analysis video on the blood-sucking bees, are we? They're so fucked.
Over the course of this essay, I will be jumping across different routes from 100 Line's many different branching paths. Occasionally, it
Because there wasn't any portrait of the bees.
Resonates across multiple routes.
I would have put the bees in S tier,
substantiated.
along with the...
As
No,
such, experience with
okay, no, I would have put the bees in tier below S tier. Because if they were mosquitoes, they would have been an S tier. But the fact they're blood-sucking bees and not blood-sucking mosquitoes puts them on tier below S. They're not going to be in B tier. They're not good enough to be in B tier. They have to be in a tier above B tier.
100 line should be assumed knowledge. Given the insane breadth of 100 line, however, I considered it prudent to very quickly go over the premise of 100 line, and quickly touch upon some important points of information from across the routes. But taking a quick overview would be a fool's errand for a game as insane in scope as 100 line.
Is it?
The original upcoming brief summary that covered significant notes from 100 Line's extended prologue, brief character summaries for the playable cast, and notes on significant plot points from various 100
Miko, you cocksucker! You can't do this to me. You can't give me a rant sona.
Being assumed knowledge was no shorter than 1,500 words. Upon completing this summary, I also recognize that there is a potentially large subset of the audience that are entirely unfamiliar with 100 Line's opening 30 hours, and would have needed more than a brief overview to access this piece.
Maybe you
I'm going to pass on my usual required reading style approach and offer an extended summary of 100 Line's 100-day prologue in form of prose, followed by a dot-pointed summary of narrative features of many routes beyond this we won't have time to slow down for, totaling just under 4,000 words and around 7 pages of this Type 11 font script. If you don't feel the need to watch a narration of the first segment of 100 Line, with a focus on the portions of the game that will be relevant to the rest of this essay, please skip ahead to this timestamp for a summary of relevant plot beats from other routes.
Sadly, we are not skipping it.
Line's first 100 days,
that would be invalidating the suffering right now of watching a 5-hour 100 Line analysis video.
This is a summary of roughly 40 hours of content, and as
he's
such,
not playing on hard.
For
Make fun of him.
And doesn't carry any of the emotional or narrative weight of the game.
He's taking damage,
I would
not
recommend
dying.
either playing 100 Line or at least watching a playthrough before progressing any further. Without further ado. Citizen of the Tokyo Residential Complex, or TRC for short, Takumi Samino, awakens in a mysterious
How is it
after
gameplay?
seeing his idyllic simple
No, pause. Go back.
or SDU to serve 100 days of military.
Okay, well, go back. I want that character ranking.
Citizen of the Tokyo Residential Complex, or TRC for short, Takumi.
How is he gameplay? Who is high? Is there a gameplay ranking S? He's literally he's the best character in the game. There is no one better than fucking Takumi outside of maybe Tsubasa when you like fully set her up. Who is going to be S rank? Who could be S rank on the gameplay ranking?
Samino awakens in a mysterious school after seeing his idyllic, simple life torn apart by the appearance of strange, plushy-like monsters that wreak havoc across the complex.
No, him getting gameplay is fine. I'm just curious if there is an S rank, who could it be? That's what I'm thinking about. Like, who the fuck would be S rank compared to fucking Takumi?
Awakening alongside 9 other people his age, mascot-like robot Siri informs the group they have been drafted into the Special Defense Unit, or SDU, to serve 100 days of military service protecting the last defense.
If he makes Hiroko S rank, he's not playing the game right.
The SDU were tasked with fighting off the plushy-like characters from the intro, known as invaders, from reaching the enigmatic defense room, which they are told contains the key to saving humanity. Both the defense room and the school are protected by purple,
he gets to act once per turn,
called the Undying Flames, which indiscriminately incinerates all organic material.
Except that guy, who is not affected by the flames.
The Undying Flames can only be moved through with the help of special extinguishers that the school houses, or an unseen tech.
Okay, Miko, right now, the point of this is literally summary. He's doing a summary because he has to assume that people are stupid and will click on a 5-hour analysis video without actually playing the game. So he's very upfront that he's doing a summary of the first 100 days, like the first prologue of it.
Technologies the invaders seemingly have access to, which they use to attack the school in waves.
So this is fine right now. The students
of the SDU use a power called Hemoanima to transform into their class armor and acquire their class weapons, which are tied to their personalities and skill sets, powered by an enigmatic and supernatural force known as Cryptoglobin. These class weapons, alongside the Undying Flames, are the only tools capable of hurting the invader commanders. far more human-like masked opponents who transform into large boss monsters in a fashion similar to the SDU's transformations. Over the course of 100 days, the SDU suffer setbacks and deaths among the group as they defend the school from the invaders, absorbing the enemy commander's cryptoglobin to become stronger themselves. Briefly following the arrival to the school known as Last Defense Academy,
I don't know why he's
many
blurring
of
the
the students
gameplay.
are
He already
reluctant to
did
fight
this clip
as
without the
requested of them
blur.
by Sirei, who had previously appeared to grant Takumi Samino and each of them their hemo-anima powers to help them fight off imminent death in the Tokyo residential complex.
I
The
could skip
majority
20
of these
minutes from this
characters
video,
are
but I'm not.
unconvinced by Sirei's demands. Threats to blow up the bombs that have been surgically implanted into the students fail to convince them, as they recognize that blowing them up would mean they wouldn't be able to fight anyway. In the evening, Takumi Samino sees a strange boy shrouded in purple flames. He seems to be trying to speak, but Takumi is unable to hear anything. Soon alarms indicating an invader attack begin blaring. At the first sight of invaders, the only students who defend the school in 100 Lines strategy RPG combat mode are Takumi alongside 3 others. Takemaru Yakushiji.
Okay, first rank. Rank C, makes sense. Character rank C, good enough. Alright, no
A rough
problems
biker
there.
type whose weapon is a motorcycle and bat. He's also a real community guy whose crew was the elderly people in his area that he did strength training with.
She's C. Okay, is there a gameplay ranking S? At this point, I don't think there's going to be a gameplay ranking S. So if Takumi's A rank, that makes sense. Punchline's Jagan, that's a good line. Because she actually is basically the Jagan for like the 2 fights you get her in.
Yuko Shizuhara, a cold, composed character who seems the most comfortable in their new situation, though she gets a bit too excited with the prospects of using her axe to murder invaders. And
Durami being A, I guess because she just builds up so much fucking voltage.
Darumi Amano.
Okay, how is Darumi his A rank? Can we talk about Darumi being his his character A ranks? This I'm not. She does make a Sayano Uda reference, but she makes it later. That's what he's talking about. Where like she makes one at a less relevant point. That was before words. The rest relevant point was made later in the story. I'm not sure what would have been the obvious situation though. I'm not sure exactly what he means by that. Her gameplay being A, I guess, works. Alright.
Mia, a pop culture reference spouting maniac super nerd who just really...
The gameplay before hard mode, fucker. When did this video come out? This video came out 2 months ago. Fucker, this video came out 2 months ago. Like the hard mode was added in like 2 months after launch. He just decided to not play on hard mode. He could have, but he didn't.
This was Danganronpa. Shoots knives through portals, Gate of Babylon style. During this fight,
oh, that's
the
why I made
first
the stupid
commander
Gilgamesh
appears,
thing, 'cause you
transforming
summoned
from
staggers.
masked humanoid to large dragon beasts in a way that unsettles the fighting students in its similarity to their own transformation style. Darumi is promptly killed by this figure, revealing to the SDU and player alike that Last Defense Academy has a machine called the Revivomatic.
That's true. The video probably took a while.
Has enough hemo-anima, and they are within the range of the school. The commander retreats on the precipice of defeat.
That actually reminded me of something. I guess why is her outfit completely different in this one shot? Because she has the striped sweater normally, and that's not her class armor either. But this one shot of her, she's in a completely different outfit. This is not a class armor because she doesn't have the little swirly thing in her heart. This is just a different drawing of her. Oh yeah, her mouth doesn't have the thing either. This must have been like an earlier drawing of her, and they just never updated it.
Within the range of the school. The commander retreats on the precipice of defeat, and Siri returns to trying to convince the rest of the special defense unit to fight.
Well, Miko, if it makes you feel any better, you're probably not missing anything
from
tonight.
Eito Aotsuki, a reserve
Okay, so Ito gets S. All right, I already made the joke that the only person in the team that gets an A rank that doesn't exist is Ito. So you know what? I'm fine with that. His gameplay rank being B. I'm still curious. Okay, if S's exist, who is gameplay S? It has to be Tsubasa. It can't be anyone else.
Boy with long-standing health issues, who's always happy to see friendship and teamwork in action, Siri agrees to try and convince the enigmatic higher-ups to provide more information to the otherwise clueless Special Defense Unit, given they have agreed to fight.
Okay, no, Kyoshika and Ima are not getting S gameplay. Like, come on.
After receiving this information.
Kyoshika's completely outclassed by Hiroko, and Ima exists, and he's only even remotely competent if you, like, kill Kako and put her so he gets +2 attack.
Ray promptly goes missing overnight,
and he's still not that good.
And anxieties grow among the students as days roll by.
Why is the gameplay blurred? I wonder. Maybe he's afraid it would be too visually distracting. But this is like most people aren't going to be watching this that aren't me.
Siri returning. Ito sneaks out of the school by himself and almost dies before being rescued by the other fighters.
Remember when they said Ito was super smart and he was
Ito found a portion of the badge on Siri's hat alongside one of the invaders that attacked him while he was outside school grounds. The next day, Hiroko and Takumi leave the grounds again to find the rest of Siri's body.
Oh yeah, first generation. I'm gonna pause again. This is gonna be the entire video. Yeah, the first generation. All the first generation mechs in 13 Sentinels are fucking crazy. Like they're the best units in the game because they are your damage dealers, and they can't really no one else can do even remotely as much damage as the first generation guys can.
Near where Ito was found. The commander returns for a second attack. This time Ito joins the defense squad, wielding a massive scythe. After the commander is defeated, Hiroko demands that it is finished off.
Of all the combat sections you could have used, why did
uses
you
her
use...
Infuser, the tool that allows the SDU
why
to transform,
did you use the
to stab
serial
the commander
battles
and
double
absorb their
Vectionist
power.
fight?
Over the next few days, Hiroko attempts
It's
to
a weird
convince the rest
choice.
of the students to fight by withholding food and threatening to force them to leave Last Defense Academy. After Takumi's...
Also, we're I guess we're like a third of the way through the announcement. Like, how is he's gonna have to speed this fucking up if he wants to get this done in 10 minutes.
Results, Takumi and Ito plead with Hiroko to not evict the rest of the students, and she promises to share information she has that the others don't know the next morning. Doing her best Siri impression, Hiroko goes missing before this can happen. No one is able to find her, both inside and outside of the school, leaving the entire group rattled when the next defensive battle begins. Preceded once more by the appearance of this strange burning ghost to Takumi. To assist the remaining fighters, their ranks are bolstered by the convinced.
Okay, so he considers Tsubasa to be S. All right, I can agree with that. I still think Takumi's better because she's useless against bosses. But her damage output, combined with her mobility, she's basically the second best character in the game. Even on normal, keep in mind, like, normal mode versus hard mode doesn't change that much. Like, yeah, you die in one hit, but, like, it doesn't increase how much health bosses have. So here, Takumi's still, like, your boss killer. But she's just insanely good at dealing with general enemies, especially if you set up her buffs. Again, normal would not change gameplay rankings. I'm serious. Like, you guys are thinking, like, hard mode fundamentally changed how you played, and it really doesn't.
Enter Tsubasa Kawana. Among the more normal members of the group, Tsubasa is a mechanic in training and plays straight man to shenanigans when Takumi is unable to. Her weapon is a decked-out ATV, and she has a penchant for throwing up the moment a situation becomes stressful. Alongside Gaku Maruko.
Okay, Gaku being S is... I can only see that for how easily he builds voltage. I don't get him being character S. I don't get that. I don't get that. But gameplay S is, like I said, for me, I only really used him to generate insane amounts of voltage incredibly quickly. with his little cheer. I guess you can relate to Gaku. He's like the most relatable character, I guess.
An orphan from an adoptive family ranking in the double digits of
But
children.
he is not someone I
Very
consider S
outwardly me
rank.
first and highly
Not
money
even
motivated.
close.
This emotional pessimist swings around a massive minigun on the battlefield. The group defeat the triplicate-splitting commander and absorb their cryptoglobin. The efforts of the SDU to search for Hiroko, who supposedly has answers to their copious questions, are emboldened by this victory. On an expedition outside of school grounds, Takumi is mysteriously knocked unconscious by a whack to the head while hiding from sudden rain, and awakens in a place incredibly
Thank
similar
God
to
Ito
his
didn't
room.
use the circular
Takumi
saw,
has
or
ended
Takumi
up
would have been fucking
at
dead.
second to last Defense Academy. A very similar location, missing the undying flames and with a much smaller cast of students. The students being...
Kyoshika being A? Character... This guy, I have never been, like, completely off wavelength from someone than this fucking guy. Where he seems to just... He likes Kyoshika more than Tsubasa. Kyoshika is like one joke over and over again. Tsubasa at least does something and doesn't have one joke over and over again. Gameplay A is like, no, come on. She's not on she's like B. I think this is the cost of like people overinflating rankings and they're afraid to just use D rank. I'm betting money that either Kirara is the only D or he's gonna have Kirara at C, despite the fact she's literally useless. Because her only big benefit is that one move that does like I think 8 if the target's isolated, and that's like good until you get Hiroko back, or that's your best attack. That's your best move in the game until Route 2. But as soon as you finish Route 2 and you get access to Hiroko again, and then Takumi gets, like, special revenge, she's fucking useless.
Kyoshika Magadori, a girl who grew
Outside
up
the
in the
one
woods
fight you
and
have to use
with
only her and
entire frame of
Takumi
reference for
against
society is
Vashnas.
shonen manga. Talks to her sword, the Holy Jumanji sword, which she uses to fight alongside a proper hemo-anima blade. Yugamu Omokage, and a
Yugamu's also A? I don't get it. Who is
assassin by trade,
I guess,
whose
like, no
self-employed
one is
body
even a C
modifications allow
in
him
his
to
mind.
stretch his limbs. A psycho who left the assassin trade because he wants to only kill those he loves. Uses hand blades alongside toxins in battle.
Okay, this man's insane. This man is insane. This man is clinically insane. Stop the stream. What the fuck am I looking at? What the fuck? Are we even playing the same video game here? Are we playing the same video game? She's easily the worst character in the game. What is the fastest boss killer? Like, is the idea that he traps the boss in like turrets all around them? But that still takes 2 turns. You could just kill the boss in 1 turn using Takumi. She's... I don't get it. What am I looking at here? She's the fastest boss. Is out mean something? What does out mean? People who know stupid acronyms, what does out mean? Someone fucking tell me. Like, you could trap the boss of all time. Yeah, he has to be retarded. I wish you didn't blur his gameplay, because I want to know what the fuck... I want to know what the fuck he is doing. That this bitch was his fastest boss killer. When he could just kill the boss in 1 fucking turn using Takumi.
O Suzuki. Incredibly rich
I
girl
don't
who lives in the
understand
station in
what
views
this man
others
was
below
doing.
her. Though this confident
I
demeanor
don't think we were
disappears
playing
whenever
the
her
same
tomato
video
boss
game.
does. Builds turrets on the battlefield. These
She's
outlandish
literally
characters
useless.
are commanded by Nigo.
You
who,
just
similar
win in
to
1
Siri,
turn.
is far
You don't
less
need
capable,
her.
confident, and informed about the war. The final student Takumi meets from the second to last Defense Academy is Nozomi Kitafuji.
How is she S? You don't need to be healed. How is she a lower rank than Kyoshika? Is she S just because she can cure stun? You just kill. You don't need to cure stun. You just kill your characters off instead. I guess like since she can cure stun, but that's not S rank. That's not S rank.
A girl unable to use Hemoanima and instead relies on artificial class armor.
But you don't need to
and focuses
spam ult because you can just kill the boss in one turn without spamming ult.
on support in battle,
Or
with
you
a
spam
mediocre
kill
replication
death
of her
ults
allies'
instead.
supernatural powers. Takumi Samino is immediately taken aback by Nozomi's similarity in appearance, voice, and demeanor to Karuha Kishiyama, his childhood friend from the Tokyo residential complex who he continues to dream of.
I'm so
and his
fucking
reason to continue
derailed.
fighting.
Fucking
Nozomi, throughout the story, will
Kura's
continue to deny any
fucking
knowledge
S-rank
or relation
combat.
to Karuha.
What the fuck?
The second to last
I'm never
defense
gonna get an
academy is also
explanation of
down
why
one
she's S
student,
rank.
the bombastic wrestler
I'm
girl,
never-
Moko Majiro, who is
Okay, so that's the only C. So of all the characters, I think all the characters. He's already talked about all the characters who are playable at this point. He should have. So like all the characters, Moko is the only one that's actually rated as C. And out of this ranking, there is not a D character. Oh, it's not Ava. Ava's gonna be like S rank for him. Like, come on. Oh, and Shoma. Knowing him, he's gonna put Shoma as S. I'm gonna be completely fucking floored. He's gonna put Shoma as S just to spite me. But like gameplay C, she should be gameplay D because she's fucking useless.
kidnapped by invaders in the last
Like
attack.
you can have a D
When a
rank. You're not
commander
gonna
far
hurt
more
people's
powerful
feelings.
than anything they've ever faced attacks.
You can be
Nigo
realistic.
informs Takumi that second to last defense academy was intended to just be a decoy school, and entrusts him with a bus that will bring the rest of the students to last defense academy.
His ranking's an inverse
Takumi
pyramid.
returns to a shocked but delighted group of original students, and tensions quickly form between the two groups as the next battle approaches. Next to join the fighting squad is Shoma Genzaki, an entirely
Okay. Defensive unit in a game about being fast. Cocksucker, you're saying Kuroa is the best damaging unit in the game. Cocksucker. Cocksucker, you're saying Kuroa is like the best boss killer in a game about being fast. You don't need turrets if you're fast. You fucking idiot. Oh, he's making that Shoma being like, cause he wants to fuck the dog. Bottom text.
self-loathing small boy who has an allergy to violence. If they're not busy comparing themselves to garbage, they're more than likely keeping Last Defense Academy running with their exceptional...
To be fair, Shoma is really fucking unhinged sometimes with Ava, and they never really do anything with it.
amount of menial tasks they complete. Before he joins the battle, he continues to slowly dream of and remember details about the past, including each member of the SDU, including the second academy.
Wait, is he like not gendering Shoma? Did I miss that? I wasn't paying attention.
Menial tasks they complete. Before he joins the battle,
No.
he continues to slowly dream of and remember details
No,
about the
he's
past,
silly.
including each member of the SDU, including the second academy members, spending time in a research facility in a place called Kamakura General Hospital, which none of the other students remember. A butting of heads
Well,
with
she called
Kurara
Shoma
leads to
he.
Shoma and Kurara entering into a fight. Training alongside Takamaru grants Shoma both an incredibly buff body temporarily.
Okay,
and the
this
will
does not
fight
need to be
in the
part
next
of your
defensive
recap,
battle,
because this doesn't come
where
back
his
at all.
unique physical and mental defenses make him the ideal candidate for defeating the mind-controlling commander that is their foe. The ghost appears once more before a figure stumbles through the Undying Flames wall. Moko Majiro has found her way to Last Defense Academy. She promptly collapses and falls into a sleep for several days. During this period, Kako Tsukumo, the
Her best cocksucker, she's one of the best damaging units in Route 1. I have never been so off wavelength with someone in my fucking life outside of my coworker. Like, she is significantly... Is he gonna say Ima is, like, S rank because he has flight? Like, he doesn't know spring... Is he gonna, like lie to me and try to imply spring traps don't exist and you don't need flight in this fucking game. Because she's one of like 3 characters who can actually do boss damage. It's her, it's Hiroko, it's Kyoshika, and then you have Takumi in Route 2 with Special Revenge. Those are the only characters who can really do boss level damage. I assume his assumption here is that he just literally doesn't know spring traps are a thing. I can't imagine someone saying she's this bad when you just override her restriction by just jump teleporting her with the fucking spring trap. I assume he just doesn't know.
Pink-haired detective-obsessed pseudo-psychic asks Takumi to convince Ima, her marginal...
Ima is S. Ima is S. Ima gameplay is A. Saddest story award. What the fuck? Wings for weapon. I get like wings for weapon, but gameplay A. Cocksucker, use spring traps. It's not fucking useful. I've never been. Well, his backstory, that he had a backstory. It was that him and Kako had a hard life. He basically, I think he had to be a male prostitute to make money to support him and his sister. I think there is like a line that he was basically fucked in the ass for money. I believe that was brought up somewhere. And remember, his backstory was completely artificial because they really needed a man getting fucked in the ass for the I don't recall. I swear they mentioned it somewhere, and they mentioned it again not too long ago in the finale. There was an offline about, I think, having to prostitute himself or something. I think that was his backstory. It'll probably be brought up later in the analysis video. He stabs Takemaru. In Route 1, at least. These aren't good captions. I'm just saying he does stab Kakamaru once. But yeah, considering gameplay A, cocksucker, spring traps exist. Come on.
Twin brother
Come on,
to let
man.
her fight on the battlefield too. Fellow non-combatant, Ima follows up by asking Takumi to convince Kako not to fight instead, offering to take her place on the battlefield should he convince her properly. Takamaru's frustrations with Ima...
It depends on how well you consider sad.
Which leads to Ima stabbing Takamaru.
Yeah, there's the scene there. It depends on how you consider sad, because like having to like live your life in like there's the sad Olympics is subjective. I don't consider him as sad as being beaten by your own dad. Even if you're taking money up the ass for your sister, I would consider that to be not as bad as being beaten by your dad and everyone hating you. Or Ito, where you're programmed wrong as a joke, and your life is abject misery for every single second of your life. I would consider Ito's probably in a better position, but he also had Ito in S rank,
leaving him out of commission for the upcoming fight against a commander who controls mist and fog. Ima, however, has been inspired by Kako's newfound self-reliance, and both join the battlefield. Ima's wings and Kako's sniper rifle serve as the key to defeating this commander, who takes off her mask to reveal a strikingly human face underneath. The SDU recognizes the signs of surrender, even if they fail to understand her as they have with each commander before, and take her prisoner, keeping her inside a cell in the courtyard that dampens the powers of Hemoanima. Nozomi and Takumi overcome some of the awkwardness between them during a duo expedition outside the school grounds in search of some medicine for Moko, who is still asleep. By the time they return, Moko has awoken of her own volition. A somewhat disconcerted Nozomi has her suspicions made real when it's revealed Moko was simply a shape-shifting commander, who the students defeat.
Yeah, that's a pretty good bit.
Without time for the SDU to rest, the prisoner escapes detainment. Ima has also disappeared. During the spare time between each of these events, the cast have been using the school's library to try and learn more about the situation they find themselves in. They discover the concept of world death within a book, detailing how humanity's haphazard treatment of the planet led to this phenomenon that caused Earth to begin destroying itself. Through Nozomi, they further learn that what the large white orb in the sky they believe to be the moon, which no Tokyo residential complex resident had seen before, is actually the artificial satellite, the supermassive building that houses the TRC. In their search for the prisoner and Ima, the SDU discover an invader base, and a small team sets off in a bus to attempt to find Ima and attack the invaders there. They manage to defeat another commander in the process, but fail to find Ima. Defeating a commander here is significant because Nozomi has begun to suffer from cryptoglobin rejection symptoms. She reveals secretly to Takumi that she was a volunteer for a program to allow for normal humans to use hemoanima, a research project her mother worked on. This is why Nozomi can fight.
I want to make a comment that he just, like, blood killed Nozomi to heal him. He just killed Nozomi to heal Takumi. Just fuck you. You shouldn't have to do that if you were playing the fucking game right.
In an artificial suit. Absorbing the hemoanima of another should allow her to stave off the symptoms. The next commander to attack Last Defense Academy arrives in the form of a giant worm that has Ima transfused onto its body. Yugamu offers an orally ingested poison that is designed to kill commanders to the group as a solution that could allow for them to rescue Ima, a poison he developed using samples from the prisoner before she escaped.
Why is it? Does he only have one gameplay thing? He just keeps recycling this one fight over and over again.
Nozomi survives scot-free, but Ima's body is still falling apart.
You're a cocksucker. I know exactly what you did. You blurred this out because you only decided to put one thing of footage in, which is this one battle at the end of Serial Battles, and you're just looping it over and over again. And you put the blur filter up because you're expecting me to not notice. You're a little bitch. You think I can't notice you're just looping the same footage over and over again? Come on.
Yugamu rescues Ima by transporting his brain into the repaired body of the still shut down Siri, granting Ima access to portions of Siri's data alongside the ability to understand the language of the invaders. However, the potentially surviving Nigo may have actual full memories as opposed to all the information Ima is missing. A small group sets off to the second-to-last Defense Academy, where they find a commander capable of winding back time, attempting to repair Nigo. In the following battle, Nigo is fully destroyed.
Give a shit.
There is no time to rest, however. Driving through the Undying Flames wall around the original school sends Takumi and the rest of the students into a bizarre illusion of generic anime high school life. The flaming ghost appears within this dream and begs for Takumi to wake up, helping him realize he's been placed in a trance by the currently attacking commander. Gaku begins playing mopey music from the festival he had put on weeks before, one of many group activities that Gaku helped organize over the past 80 days for morale of the SDU. This commander's defeat is followed by the arrival of the Supreme Commander, which Takumi met at second-to-last Defense Academy. Ima translates for her to the group. She offers them a way out. Give up the object they're defending with the defense,
really hoping
and
the rest
she will
of this
give
video
them a
is better
ship
than
capable
this.
of returning to the artificial satellite. The group
I'm hoping this is the comedy of his
decision, but most seem determined
analysis
to return.
video.
They have been fighting with no real motivations or understanding of their objectives. The only one adamant on staying is Nozomi Kirafuji. However, the information that she was a willing participant is somehow leaked to the group, and she finds herself ostracized from everyone bar Takumi. When day 93 rolls around, the Supreme Commander returns with the ship in tow. With everyone bar Nozomi and Takumi inside, the whole plan is revealed to be a trap as she kills Ima in Siri's body, and the ship turns out to be a prison similar to the ones in the courtyard. Takumi and Nozomi free the students and defeat the Supreme Commander, but it comes at the cost of Nozomi's life. Before Kako can take out her vitriol on the dying commander, Takumi gains the ability to understand her through absorbing her cryptoglobin. She refuses to offer him any answers to his questions as Nozomi dies in his arms. In her dying moments, Nozomi is revealed to have the same massive scar as Karuwa, and refers to Takumi by Karuwa's own nickname for him, Taki. Nozomi trails off in her last moments as she questions how she could forget. A bewildered Takumi agrees with Eito that the group should enter the defense room and find out what they've been fighting to defend this whole time. Before they can enter, the ghost reveals himself to the whole group. Takumi is capable of understanding him as he did during the illusion. He reveals that his real body is inside the defense room, and he is going to be used to launch a series of missiles that will kill all life on the planet once charged on day 100, so that humanity can return. Unsure what the intended fates for the SDU are, the Undying Flames boy, who feels an attachment to the group he has watched since day 1, suggests they kill him to save themselves. Inside the defense room, they find his real body is that of a baby's, sustained in a jar that can hold and offset the undying flames he constantly produces.
Tornado. Nothing left to do this, by the way. Dako has a gun. Only Gaku's shooting with a gun. I'm a little late for the song.
Emergency. Switching to reserve power supply. Restore system immediately.
What the heck? What's happening? Incredible! Such incredible power! It's like no other crypto globe I've taken before. Incomprehensible power!
Can't believe the psych guy was evil.
Upon entering the chamber, Eito Aotsuki kills the Undying Flames baby and absorbs his massive wealth.
You know, this would have been the time that...
Eito reveals that he had lied.
Hey, this would have been the time to actually show that fight on screen instead of just looping the same fight against Double Veshness over and over again.
About many of his beliefs and was behind the deaths of Sirei, Hiroko, and the prisoner's escape and death, alongside other betrayals such as destroying the fridge that contained all the perishable goods and revealing Nozomi's secret after spying on her conversation with Takumi.
Not even showing the picture of
Eito
him under the
suffers
bed.
from a
Fucked
condition
up.
that causes him to view humans as repulsive monsters, and after reading the bloody war-filled history of humanity, deemed them unworthy of continuing life after world death, and attempted to sabotage the Special Defense Unit's mission from the moment Sirei revealed it was to save humanity. With Takumi overcoming these obstacles at each path, Eito has decided he will see to it personally that humanity will all be killed. Takumi and co fight him, inevitably defeating him and absorbing his cryptoglobin. In the last 7 days of 100 Line's first route, following Eito Aotsuki's betrayal and killing of the baby in the defense room, whose immense cryptoglobin births the Undying Flames, Takumi Sumino's Hemo Anima is powerful enough to use his unique skill, which so far has let you reset any battle to the start, to reset his service at Last Defense Academy all the way back to the beginning, returning to day 2 before Eito Aotsuki can destroy Sirei. On day 100, following the reveal of an escape pod that would have let the SDU return to the artificial satellite before the missiles, Takumi uses his newfound power with the express purpose of saving everyone who died the first time around, prioritizing Nozomi.
It's kind of funny now that I think about it. The difference between Route 1 and Route 2, literally, there's no change. What I mean is, like, Futurum is saved, even in Route 1, and more people are alive in Route 1 as well. Which means Route 2 is actually worse in an overall outcome than Route 1 was, because humanity is at least still alive in Route 1.
From here, the player has access to a variety of choices.
Also, you notice how he doesn't bring up the stinger at the end of Route 1, which would have been, in my opinion, an important thing to bring up when it comes to analyzing this game. Because it's a fucking stinger that doesn't go anywhere. But he doesn't bring it up.
That affect a narrative already altered by Takumi bringing a large amount of cryptoglobin energy back with him when he travelled back in time, granting the SDU the ability to communicate with enemy commanders where previously
that would have been part of his
their language was
summary.
not understood. Over the course of the first route and subsequent post-reset routes, a series of major plot revelations reveal a large number of important context details to the story, to outline some of the major ones that we don't have time to slow down for later. The game does not take place on Earth, but instead on the similar planet Futurum, which humanity fled to after Earth began to experience the aforementioned world death.
He pronounces
All of humanity
Futurum.
lives on the artificial satellite.
Pause. I'm using my little headphones to pause. He pronounces it as Futurum, but everyone else pronounces it as Futurum. That's kind of a weird thing. Just caught that.
A moon-like spaceship that rests above Futurum. Futurans are remarkably similar to humans, but are occasionally born with cryptoglobin, a special blood property that allows them to control over the movement and density of their blood to a level that breaks established laws of physics. Because of its supernatural properties, Futurans born with cryptoglobin control have historically held revered positions of power during the planet's history, and maintained much greater levels of peace over said history. Humanity's invasion of Futurum resulted in a planet-scale war. Humanity's technology gave them an initial edge, but their inability to harm Futurans with cryptoglobin left the land ravaged and the war at a stalemate. The baby in the defense room is a Futuran who was born with an absurdly large amount of cryptoglobin, allowing him to create psychic ghosts to communicate with people, manipulate and create undying flames, and other supernatural powers. The baby is kidnapped by humans and taken to the artificial satellite for research. The Undying Flames baby is being kept alive despite his inability to physically mature and constant production of undying flames by the machine he is contained in within the defense room. His flames are being siphoned to fill a barrage of missiles that will launch on day 100, once they're fully charged, and wipe out all organic life on Futurum's surface. There is an escape pod for the SDU to use to return to the artificial satellite before the missiles launch on day 100. It otherwise cannot be activated early. Cire's computing brain contains the Will of Humanity, a decision-making system that simulates the opinion of every human alive on the artificial satellite, and directs Cire to follow the majority answer garnered in a simulated true democracy. Every member of the SDU, bar Nozomi Kirifuji, is a clone made from the DNA of the Undying Flames baby. Their backstories were all artificially implanted into them. Karawa appears distinctly similar to Nozomi because Nozomi spoke to Takumi as they were grown in the hospital lab. The enemy commander Ava, who was captured by the SDU following her surrender in many routes, has an adoptive daughter named Commune, who is a major player in the Futuran Revolutionary Army, which is opposed to the war between Futurans and humanity and seeks a peaceful resolution. Last Defense Academy also has a device capable of brainwashing people through a process involving extended electrocution sessions, used on Ava in a variety of routes to have her side with the SDU. On certain routes, the enemy commander Ava also becomes a playable unit, whose personality differs based on how much she's been brainwashed, if at all. The plushy monsters you fight throughout the game are artificial life created from the bodies of Futurans and humans alike. It is a painful existence of suffering, exemplified by their pleas and cries that can be heard when the SDU has absorbed enough cryptoglobin on any given route. The SDU have...
Okay, that's not true. It's not based off of how much they've absorbed in a route, because it's always at the end, and it has no relationship, because most of the time, Veshna sucks all the commanders off. I assumed it was generally at the end because they come in without commanders, so they actively scream for help rather than being silenced by them. That was the interpretation I made, but that analysis he made is just wrong, because that happens no matter how many commanders they actually suck. And they don't suck commanders most of the time in the Ito Alive section of the timeline, because Veshna just kill steals them.
There's a multitude of secret rooms and passageways, including a hidden ladder in the gymnasium that leads to the escape pod, and a basement that contains an emergency escape request control system that can only be used with a code containing a number associated with all but one SDU member.
And also, there's that one tunnel in the right cage that he's probably not going to bring up.
These numbers appear on the SDU members when they die, meaning the code is intended to be used if there is only one survivor. Inputting it simply results in the school self-destructing, however. Anything else plot significant?
Yeah, he doesn't bring it up. Fuck it.
So let's leave it at that and take a look at the avenue through which we'll be analyzing 100 Line.
Okay, we're finally getting to the fucking point. See, now he's not But why has he stopped learning
Exploring
it?
and understanding literature
He's
is an
still
undeniably
recycling the
large
same
endeavor.
footage.
As such, the historic compartmentalization of essay and analysis into various literary perspectives has become a mainstay of classification in the field to help provide a basis for reading and understanding. Famously, cultural materialism uses the language.
Okay, sometimes I need to pause to see what his stupid memes are. I need to like.
So let's leave it at that and take a look at the avenue. A large endeavor. As such, the historic understanding literature is. Exploring and understanding literature is an undeniably large endeavor. As such, the historic compartmentalization of essay and analysis into various literary perspectives has become a mainstay of classification in the field to help provide a basis for reading and understanding. Famously, cultural materialism uses the language and concepts of Marxist theory to approach tales through cultural and historical lenses and look at stories through the primary factor of class. Cultural materialism's approach to class, alongside its attachment to historical and cultural elements of the works it critiques, means it's just as capable of being used to analyse Homer's Odyssey as it is to approach Steven Lisberger's Tron, only differing in an understanding of what class was at the work's moment of history when it was authored. A cultural materialist analysis of 100 Line has excellent entry points into the work. 100 Line's inherently colonial narrative explores ideas of class both in terms of direct colonial oppression, and then further explores class through the lens of outside perspective in the Box of Blessings, Veshness, Rebellion, and Ava routes. 100 Line further cements its invitation of cultural materialist analysis in the second scenario route, where the reveal that each character's backstory was made up presents privilege as an arbitrary and unearned methodology used by the social classes to belittle, oppress, and demean a lower social class, in this case, the Special Defense Unit, and using this as a tool to distract from the oppression of those who hold all material power and wealth. The alternative interpretation method of structuralist analysis presents a frustratingly vague description of being tied to the analysis of literary structures. Sharing its name with and spawning from the wider philosophical and sociological school of thought, structuralism focuses on symbols and repeated narrative methods and ideas through which texts have expressed themselves and been analysed since before essays of analysis were readily published and available. To analyse structurally is to approach Jane Austen's social labyrinth romance, Northanger Abbey, in the same way you approach Mary Shelley's monster science fiction Frankenstein, to only separate the two works in the conclusions they draw out of the Gothic horror style and the history around them, despite Austen's work arguably satirizing and parodying the genre. The structuralist will also find great joy in trawling through 100 Line, their line of reasoning backed up by the development of roadblocks and narrative complications regardless of the route taken, an idea explored partially in the aptly named Steady Fundamental route, as well as each of the students being fundamentally designed in-universe to embody an archetype, an idea mirrored and questioned in the Futuran Commander's Paragon titles. Structuralist readings, however, might struggle to grapple with the Box of Blessings approach to concluding Gaku's character arc during endings 27 and 28. Despite dedicated growth provided to Gaku during conversations with Takumi,
I guess it's the idea, because that's the one where he gets the harem ending.
While searching for the Boxes of Blessings, Gaku seems to be rewarded for regressing to his most basic character traits during ending 27, and the player is punished for attempting to stop him in ending 28. This is seemingly contradictory to a structuralist understanding of how characters grow and change in narratives like 100 Line, which contains.
The problem with that is you're over-analyzing a route that is literally a joke, and a route that exists just to pad it out so there can be more endings. This is the problem with over-analysis in any fucking video. You know why Gaku gets the harem ending? Because it's a joke. That's it. It's not, there's no deep analysis. It was a joke. And why does Ito just get to escape of everything? Because he needed to pad out an ending. Because they had to hit 100 endings. And every branch has to have so many endings in it. So they just threw away a half-assed ending. Where Ito just gets away because he needed to have another ending for his quota. Like, come on.
Elements of coming-of-age narratives even outside of the coming-of-age route. Stepping back from a structured perspective and analysing Gaku's actions on a character level alleviates this contradiction by having the act still serve as a character conclusion relative to his growth, but there'll be time and place for that discussion later. Post-structuralism, however, is not simply about rejecting the ideas presented through structuralist thought. The origins of post-structuralist analysis lie in the wider sociological construct of structuralism too. How signs and signals are presented in everyday life, and how we navigate these concepts in society. Post-structuralist thought rejects an objective true signal or sign and determines that all language, images, sounds, and art are open to the interpretation of the viewer. When two people hear the word cat, one might imagine a cute house pet with a lazy demeanor, where another with a strong
Oh,
allergy
that's
might
where that
imagine an
image was
object
from. Yeah, it really was Red Sun. I don't remember that. I've been playing this game for 160 hours. I'm not gonna remember one CG where they have the funny Red Sun in it.
of a cat further away from that of animal,
Weird
and more
dog,
in the
by the way.
territory of a harmful substance. What does this mean in terms of analysing Hundred Line? Let's return to the perspectives we know and understand. A cultural materialist approach to the coming-of-age route may view the tale as a story of unification to take on the overbearing cultural identity of capital class. The literal oppressive dictator Veshnes succeeds the position of final boss to Ato Outsky, whose in-depth knowledge of human history and pessimistic outlook of humans as disgusting monsters makes Ato representative of the diminished nihilistic rejection of revolution and the misanthropy that perpetuates class struggle. Meanwhile, the structuralist approaches the coming-of-age route as the Bildungsroman the title suggests, understanding the shared character.
What? I don't know where the fuck he's going with this. Coming of age was this fucking... Okay, let's back up. What the fuck are you talking about?
A cultural materialist approach to the coming-of-age route may view the tale as a story of unification to take on the overbearing cultural identity of capital class. The literal oppressive dictator Veshnes succeeds the position of final boss to Ato Outsky, whose in-depth knowledge of human history and pessimistic outlook of humans as disgusting monsters makes Ato representative of the diminished nihilistic rejection of revolution and the misanthropy that perpetuates class struggle.
Or maybe because he's just he represents anti-friendship, and coming of age was... You beat coming of age literally with the power of friendship. All your characters in the Ito route get superpower with the power of friendship, enjoying their hero anima hand in hand in friendship. Ito, as a rejection directly through humanity, just represents anti-friendship. It's not a class struggle. He's just the anime bad guy.
Meanwhile, the structuralist approaches the coming-of-age route as the Bildungsroman the title suggests, understanding the shared character arcs of the Special Defense Unit as a series of approaches to overcoming struggle. Taking a wider approach and considering alternate endings also suggests through the structuralist approach that Hundred Line is presenting the coming-of-age story as a nostalgic look back at childlike innocence, and how recreating joy and obvious pleasure can be achieved through scope measuring. Perhaps even going as far as to suggest that the coming-of-age route suggests a moral good for the self in limiting your understanding of impacts and circle of care to your immediate surroundings, recognizing the impossibility of the layman in creating substantial change. How can these two conflicting conclusions of revolution and peace be resolved? Historically, the answer has been to defer to the author. In this case, asking coming-of-age route lead writer Akihiro Togawa what their intentions were with the ideas presented in the route. For authors unable to answer, such as for far older works, essayists butt heads over intended meaning in debates founded in textual evidence and biographical literature regarding the author. Post-structuralism's rejection of the unilateral meaning of symbols lets them take the path of least resistance and determine both well-founded conclusions to be effective and correct analysis, looking at what they share in common as opposed to where they differ. Roland Barthes titled this concept of text interpretation being removed from authors' historical purview and biases as death of the author, alongside some really badass quotes which translate from French to something along the lines of, to give a text an author is to impose limits on a text. Through the author's death, the reader is invited to determine and understand what the meaning of the text was without demanding an understanding.
That is true. This has only been 40 minutes.
of the historical...
I told you that the reason why I'm splitting this into two is it's going to be a while. I've been streaming for an hour now, and I've covered 40 minutes of the video.
...cultural elements that surround the text's work. Or, alternatively, ones the author may have included that a lack of outside information surrounding fails to illuminate whether they were included with intention or otherwise. This doesn't give license for readers to suggest whatever they want about a text. You still need to convince your contemporaries your analysis and understanding is valid. As such, post-structuralist analysis, in brief half-truth, assumes it will be considered wrong and unintended from the get-go.
I also, no one's actually paying attention to the gameplay, but I want you to remember, this is someone who's saying Takumi is A and not S, and Kuroa is, like, the best boss killer in the game. Like, he made this stupid strat of, like, covering the bosses in bombs, burning, like, 8 bombs to do, like, I think 12 damage? Maybe 16? You could just done that much damage by killing your guys off.
It forces the essay to argue its points with such vigor and certainty.
He's only doing, like, 10 damage, because he's not, like, he's not even using desperation or defense potion.
The essay can stretch its breadth in terms of both outcomes, and beyond that, interpret a singular scene in multiple ways to support evidence for a singular conclusion, going as far as interpreting the text as presenting contradictory ideas, given both identified concepts in their presentations direct towards similar...
No, you can't do Nozomi on Kurok. Nozomi doesn't give you AP. She just cleanses stun. I guess you mean like you could burn 100 voltage to summon the big bombs. I guess.
Conclusions.
But you could just do that as much damage on any
also
extra
doesn't
work.
exist as a concept that suggests any given work of art is to be considered without order. Essays and arguments are still presented through the guise of authorial intent. The role of an artist in creating a work is still a consideration of any form of analysis that chooses to interact with this concept. This will be especially significant through 100 Line as we consider how the player acts as an author to 100 Line's story through their decision-making during the game.
Not really. Like, I don't believe, like, the player is the author. You're going down tracks made for you. You're not the author. You're just exploring the work of someone else. You're not creating... Like, in a game, like, in games that are more simulation-based, like, I would say, like, the most obvious one people would throw out would be, like, XCOM 2. That's what I think about, because, like, that game is so built on its systems that you can make stories off of them. In that situation, or Dwarf Fortress is, like, a really good example as well, because the game is so procedurally generated. In that situation, the player is the author, because the player is sculpting the story, and the story is the gameplay. The player is not the author in 100 Line, because you can't influence the world. The gameplay, which is what the player can influence, not the story. The player influences the gameplay. And if the gameplay can't tell a story, the player cannot be an author. You're just playing, like I said, you're just playing someone else's story.
A post-structuralist analysis of a text is just
doesn't matter how many routes there are. You're walking down someone else's path
found within the text. By suggesting that a work is deconstructing an understood binary, the author paves the way to discuss each element of the work as a thematic superposition.
I would also say, like, if you want to do a bit like Takumi's, like, purposely kills off his own friends to keep ramping up power to get stronger. And I represented that through gameplay, because that's how I fucking played. That would be a bit if it wasn't for the fact that it's still a visual novel, and Takumi's character is completely set.
An artistic object that represents more than one thematic outcome. 100 Line's most blatant binary deconstruction is the difference between the ending and beginning of a story. 100 Line's prologue constitutes an entire playthrough of the game, featuring its own credit sequence and ending number. Before significant game and story mechanics such as the flowchart and the ability to make narrative decisions is even unlocked, the characters have experienced an entire 100 days of surviving in a game that has presented that concept as its whole premise. This ending, that's labelled as Ending 0, leads directly into the beginning of the rest of the game's routes, confronting Ato on the second evening. Yet, despite this being an ending by the game's own standards, it has consistent repercussions backwards as Takumi Samino's return to the past has brought with it a series of physical changes to the world that have changed the course of events that will take place for the entirety of the following routes. 100 Line features another ending that changes events that precede it. Ending 76, History Repeating, creates the very events that precede it by ending with Takumi having his mind infected by a mind-controlled parasite,
let's talk about the
whose
close
consciousness imprints upon Takumi as it returns to Day 2 in a concept named the Cursed Cycle. We'll be discussing and understanding the Cursed Cycle in detail later, but for now it's significant to understand
beg of you,
this.
talk about the Cursed
The Cursed Cycle is a supernatural physical consequence of Takumi's original return to Day 2, that results in the consciousnesses of each SDU member being flung back to the point in time he originally returned to, every time they reach 10 AM on day 100.
Except for the 50 endings where that doesn't happen.
This very concept contradicts our ability to see visuals and read dialogue from endings that go beyond this point in time,
It's almost...
such as all 3 endings of the Rebellion route.
Yeah, it's almost like... It's almost like he threw that into a story that didn't need it.
100 Line here deconstructs the binary of ending and beginning by not only having endings serve as the starting point for several routes, but having ending mean something entirely different to the player reading the story and the characters within, who fail.
Again, this is an over-analysis thing where he's taking everything in the story with faith. Like he's taking this, which is the idea that this fucker just threw in this loop idea into the story, like arbitrarily threw it in. And he had to basically waive roughly half of the endings as outliers because they break that cycle for the sake of having a cursed cycle, which is not justified by half the endings ignoring it. And he, instead of seeing this as like, this is a problem with the writing, he's saying that this is completely intentional. And it's just the person's misconception of endings. And it's not that this is written like shit.
To experience the same events we do. 100 Line also explicitly invites this sort of post-structuralist reading in a more direct way by presenting this type of critical perspective as a real interpretation of a dream in the story. Moko Mojiro serves as Game Master during the 80-day-long romance route, which opens with Takumi dreaming of kissing 3 of 100 Line's cast of SDU members, with all 3 women sharing their portion of Takumi's dream. Moko alleviates the tension by turning the conflict into a game in which each girl will date Takumi for a period of time, and the two will attempt to find that romantic spark during this allotted period. Beyond the character studies into Takumi, Kurara, Kyoshika, Moko, and Tsubasa that this route offers,
I would love to hear his fucking analysis of Kyoshika's representation and relevance in the story.
Moko occasionally performs check-in interviews with each contestant. We are privy to the ones between Takumi and Moko. On day 98, following the rejection of the romantic inquiries of all 3 girls, Takumi questions what the dream he had during his coma before the route starts meant. To quote from Moko, "Right, I started our game because we interpreted the dream to mean one of the girls in it was destined for you. But now we just have to wonder what it really meant. I mean, if you'd chosen one of them, that dream would have tied you to her, and everything else would have just been an obstacle to your rightful destiny. That's at least one way to interpret this, right?" Moko here broaches the very foundation of post-structuralist understanding of symbols. The symbol, or the dream, can be interpreted in a multitude of ways, all of which are equally as valid, even concluding that it was just a dream. But to play the romance route is to undeniably tie the dreams Takumi and these girls have as resonantly romantic. Even if Takumi rejects all 3, and follows up by deciding to not declare his heart to Nozomi, the route centers around romance thematically. But how did we get here? This line of questioning takes us out of the preamble of understanding post-structuralist thought. We're now equipped to go play in the thematic sandbox that 100 Line offers its players.
It's not a sandbox!
Before we broach beyond the romance route, I do need to stress the absolute nightmare of approaching text from the post-structuralist lens. You cannot suggest anything about the text without justifying it first. As such, I want to very briefly posit an idea suggested in the brief synopsis of cultural materialism in reference to 100 Line. Hundred Line is a story that is very clearly interested in overtly presenting anti-war and anti-colonial ideas.
Yes.
The actions that humanity takes are directly referred to as and considered immoral by various members of the SDU, and the turmoil that comes from understanding these presents real dilemmas to the cast. There is copious evidence to this fact in the SDU's lack of denial of Ato's readings of human history as abhorrent, their lack of counter-arguments against the immorality opposed upon them by Ava and other Futurians they talk to, and the SDU's predisposition to disobeying Sire being treated as the morally correct option both by the characters and the narrative itself and the rewards that the player are given for taking these actions. I'm getting this out of the way spontaneously now so I can freely refer to Hundred Line as anti-war and anti-colonial across the rest of the piece.
Okay, is there a pro-colonial story? Let's be honest here. I like everyone goes like a story being anti-war. What story is pro-war? Like, name me a story that is pro-war. I'll wait. Like, everyone makes the comment like, ah, man, this game is anti-war and pro-war and 40K is not even. I don't consider 40K a fucking setting. Or I really don't like 40K because it feels like a hollow setting that just exists for big robots to smash into each other. 40K is, I guess, pro-war because 40K, I don't consider 40K to be a story. I wouldn't even consider Tom Clancy to be pro-war. Like, yeah, he has a military background, he'll bring it up, but he's not going to be like, EDF is not a serious story. I'm not like the seriousness, but like, yeah, EDF's a shitpost. Yes, EDF is pro-war, or else we'll back that up. Okay, yes, EDF is pro-war. But the idea, in like a serious story, Starship Troopers was pro-war, but again, Starship Troopers was still anti-war, and it represents war as bad. It doesn't represent war as good. It's satirical about war. I don't know. It's just the idea of like people always like this story is anti-war, this story is anti-colonialism, and it's just like, yeah, because that's generally what anyone's going to say. Like you don't make a story. No one makes a story about like, man, colonialism is fucking based. Like no one intentionally lays that out because people are just gonna bitch at you for doing it. It's like saying, "Oh man, this story is pro-racism." It's like no one writes a serious pro-racism story.
Please don't make me justify it more. It's not even subtext, it's just text.
Yeah, it's just text. It's fucking okay. It's not it's not a sandbox when you don't have any actual control over the story and you're just reading someone else's fucking story. It's not a sandbox. It's not a sandbox. You're just walking down nature trails someone else has already carved. It's like walking down trails in a forest. Yeah, they can wind around and there's different paths you can take, but it's not a sandbox.
Let's tie up the question of the romance route before we find ourselves too far away from it. The decision that splits the SF route and the romance route occurs when
I swear to God, this fucker does not bring up Trium Rays. I'm gonna throw a rock at him.
Takumi decides to either follow
Remember
through
Trium
with Hirako's
Rays?
request to kiss her or to not. Kissing Hiroko leads to the romance route beginning. This isn't the only time a very literal action leads to a corresponding sort of route occurring.
It's almost like it's arbitrary. SF is steady fundamental. That's what SF stands for. It's steady fundamental. But the idea of like kissing her is like, yeah, it's thematically connected, but it's not like a deeper meaning. It's just he wanted to write a romance route.
On day 16 on the kill Ato, leave the school line leads to the character disappearing entirely from the plot. This isn't the only time a very literal action leads to a corresponding sort of
I see what
route
he's saying
occurring.
with this.
Avoiding the masked killer on day 16 on the kill Ato, leave the school line leads to the character disappearing entirely from the plot. Only by choosing to kick them instead and actively confronting the killer do the themes they bring stay in the story.
Okay.
100 Line presents a development of the choose-your-own-adventure novel, where the core themes of the story are determined by the choices you make, often very explicitly. A resounding example of this comes from the origins of the Cult of Takumi route. During the Day 15 altercation with Veshness that leads to a three-way decision where one member of the SDU must be sacrificed, the player is given the choice between losing Tsubasa, Kyoshika, or Takamaru. Choosing Tsubasa pushes the games to its boundaries by selecting an unfit candidate who can't complete the task, leading to the incredibly unique Veshness route, which features no comparison in terms of
Is that the
content
picture
across
you had to
regions.
use?
Giving up the shonen-loving Kyoshika instead removes childlike innocence from the story, leaving room for the harrowing truth of the SDU's origins to be revealed in the second scenario route.
That's a way to think about it.
Takamaru is the only male option for sacrifice on Day 15, and 100 Line is excessively aware of this.
Okay,
Takamaru tells us this when you select him. I mean, who else is gonna do this? In response to Kyoshika's, "Why not me?" Takamaru says, "You're a great warrior and all, but you're a girl. How can we let a girl blow herself to shit? It ain't right."
He's gonna talk about how sexist he is.
While Takumi is the main character, the medium through which the player makes decisions, the player also receives control over each member of the SDU during strategy combat sections, including Takamaru.
Yeah.
Selecting Takamaru to sacrifice himself here plays into masculine protector fantasies, an idea exemplified by how Takamaru carries himself following the decision. 100
Yeah,
Line
but
assumes that if a
counterpoint. Kyoshika is also like counterpoint. Kyoshika's a heavy damage dealer, and Hiroko's also a heavy damage dealer. So like a person who gets more powerful the more they attack and the more violent they are could also be debated as a masculine character trait. Or Kyoshika being head slamming Kyoshika's effect doesn't really tie into any story thing. It's just like the target has to be by themselves. But it's like I feel like trying to tie his ability to get armor by moving, because Moko also gets armor and also has a taunt. I don't know if Moko has a taunt, but Moko also gets armor. Does that make Moko masculine then? And I generally don't like the idea of tying gameplay to characters, because most of the time you'll come up with like one example or like one or two examples that fit your point, and then everything else doesn't, and then you just ignore them.
Takamaru carries himself following the decision.
Like I don't
100 Line assumes that if a player makes the
I don't agree
decision
with
to
him on that.
sacrifice Takamaru here, they agree with Takamaru's sentiments about what is right for a man to do and want a story that reflects these ideas.
No, because you don't, like, when the player's making this choice, this is not something they're considering. You have to retroactively work backwards to come to this conclusion. When you're given this choice by context, I guess the idea is you just don't want the girls to die. I guess that could have been a thought process. Like, like Tsubasa's a bad choice. I can say that. Like, I made that analysis when I first got to that choice. Like, why the fuck would you pick Tsubasa? But it's also like Tsubasa's the most useful of the three. Kyoshika is the least useful of the three. Like, tying it to, like, sacrificing childhood innocence, I don't think really works, because a lot of the other characters are just as stupid and childish as she is. But, I don't know. I feel like you have to you're working backwards to make this work, and it's not really it's not a choice the player's actually making, and it's not a choice the player is making specifically agreeing with him when you don't even hear his defense, his idea for it, until after you've already made the choice.
Alternatively, we can broach the idea of selecting Takamaru as opposed to either of the girls as a lashing out at masculine competition for a player attached to Takumi.
No.
As a masculine figure with a heart of gold and proven physical prowess, Takamaru Takamaru represents
We picked Takamaru to throw him out because he was competition for the ladies. Like, anyone else gets to have romance besides Takumi because he's the main fucking character. Like, there was competition. Come the fuck
threat
on.
to the Takumi's place in the SDU hierarchy.
Come the fuck
point,
on.
we
Like,
could
you ever
say that
did
when
this?
you choose to sacrifice Takamaru, 100 Line the game assumes you want a story where Takumi's position as the beloved masculine leader of the group is never under siege. An
No,
idea
but he-
exemplified by Hiroko's characterization within the Cult of Takumi route, where the previously independent and strong-willed Hiroko becomes yet another subservient member of the Cult of Takumi. This second reading sounds
But-
harsh and paints a pretty poor picture of players who pick Takamaru, but is intrinsically linked to the way that Cult of Takumi
That fucking heart. That's a good stopping point. But no, the problem with this idea is, you're working backwards. People aren't making this choice thinking about this at all. Because you can only make this kind of conclusion, and you also don't know anything about what the route's trying to process until after the fact. Again, this is just a thing. This is why I can't. I really hate analysis like this. As I've tortured myself by spending over 5 hours watching the fucking analysis video of 100 Line, because it's like, you're not thinking about this. Yes, you can come to this conclusion, but only after the fact. Only when you're trying to derive meaning from a choice after you've already made it. Not when you're in the moment deciding who you're going to sacrifice. Because for gameplay reason, you sacrifice Kyoshka because she's the least useful. But that's not the conclusion he would make. He makes the conclusion that only works later on for the sake of the narrative he's trying to push.
plays out.
Downtrodden.
Downtrodden after Takamaru's death, Takumi is offered some performance-enhancing medicine that Yugamu has concocted. Taking this medicine is where the Cult of Takumi route really starts. The pills improve Takumi's leadership capabilities by increasing his charms. Everyone with Cryptoglobin finds themselves rapidly enamored and obsessed with Takumi. Thanks to this obsession, the route quickly devolves into a comedic play with the fantasy of cartoonish masculine ideals.
I thought it was
As the Undying Ghost initially, and Sire enable Takumi to continue down the expressed uncomfortable path of continuing to take this medicine, for Takumi both physically and psychologically. The SDU's fanaticism for Takumi turns from infatuation to worship. Takumi shelters himself with the belief that he's continuing to do this to protect his fellow SDU members, but his prior embarrassment and distaste for Sire's rewards, special one-on-one time with Takumi awarded to the SDU member with the best performance in the last offensive battle, quickly fades as they become increasingly perverse and erotic. The closest exception being the more zany Second Academy's requests from Moko and Yugamu, which allowed Takumi to play straight man once again, thanks to their relative absurdity. Takumi's self-identified protector role that awards him this privileged position without guilt is an inaccurate assessment of himself in this route. Eito ends up killing all the remaining commanders during this route in order to prove himself to Takumi and garner a pseudo-privileged position in the forming cult, removing the value of Takumi's protector role by limiting defensive battles to game-described cannon fodder. The pampering continues until the cult route's singular choice, where unaffected Nozomi offers Takumi one last chance to turn around and ask Yugamu for an antidote. Here the player is presented with the choice to either side with Nozomi, recognizing the uncomfortable nature of this path and electing to free everyone of their infatuation,
man-child.
or side with Eito and continue to have Takumi regress into the man-child idealized
I'm gay, let's fuck. That's good.
concept of a protector. The presented choice is false, however.
You did the right thing.
Oh, you want the... There you go. Let me... There... Oh, shit.
Idealized
There you go. There's your cap. Unless you mean like what I was fucking saying right there.
concept of a protector. The presented
I don't
choice
remember what
is
I...
false, however.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't remember what the fuck... What happened to the fucking video? I don't remember what the fuck I was saying right there. I don't remember what I said that you're gonna cap, but it would... Just cap it out of context, why not?
You did the right thing.
Oh, I'm gay, let's fuck.
You didn't do anything wrong. And we'll prove it to you. We'll keep fighting to protect you. Then, you'll become the savior of humanity. All of mankind will bow down to you. With your mystique as a living symbol, anyone will be able to tell they're looking at a god.
He's not gonna play the picture of the gay sex, isn't he? He's not gonna play the picture. He's not gonna use the picture, is he? I'm gonna be very upset if he doesn't have the...
100 Line isn't interested
Coward!
in every decision
Coward! 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 Coward!
you make drive the themes of a story, and siding with Nozomi is one of the many punishment decisions in 100 Line that are not strictly bad endings where everyone dies. 100 Line instead tells the player it's too late to turn back now and to reap the consequences of what sacrificing Takamaru meant. Siding with Nozomi leads to the most horrifying sequence in the game. Takumi's
Is that the most I would say brainwashing and raping Nozomi is probably worse than being turned into Ito's fuck puppet.
antidote Yugamba provides him with is instead a paralyzing agent, and Takumi is forced to watch as the rest of the SDU, guided by Eito, take turns brutally beating Nozomi to death for attempting
this
to
one.
remove their idol.
I forgot about
100
that.
Line
They do
isn't
beat Nozomi
afraid
to
to make
death.
the player lie in the bed they've made, and rewards willing participants with deeper dives into a symphony of themes across routes. Siding with Eito in Cult pushes the critique of this faux cultural idea of the masculine protector further. The rest of the SDU's rewards of time with Takumi begin to mandate more agency over Takumi's body. Just like the other ending, Takumi is objectified, but this time in a way that seems not to register in his single-track, ego-driven mind. Beyond this, Takumi making a brainwash Nozomi refer to him as Taki approaching day 100 on this route is a brutally in-the-face example of how childish Takumi's perception of himself and others has become.
Yeah, he
In the
gets
face of
corrupted
no
by
real
his own
threats,
power.
while having praise and success lauded on him, Takumi regresses to a childlike view of the world.
Yeah.
Takumi begins to lash out at everyone who doesn't feed into his self-centered worldview that maintains that Takumi is a victim, despite a majority of the route being spent pampering the protagonist. The Cult of Takumi route is a shining example of how, despite giving the player reins over certain themes through choices, 100 Line isn't subservient to the player's whims. Where sacrificing Takamaru to begin the route adds the theme of masculinity to the focus of the remaining 79 days, it doesn't grant the player agency over how these themes are discussed and presented.
I guess, but I feel like it's just... I don't think people are thinking about that. I don't think even the writer was thinking about that. I don't think even the writer was thinking about, man, we gotta take Takamaru out, so this is gonna lead to the harem route, because it represents masculinity. It's just, no, they wanted a harem route. I don't think Takamaru being picked was specifically the reason for it. You could debate because they just didn't want to have a gay sex scene with Takamaru.
Cult isn't a war story about a tortured soldier who does anything for his found family that reflects his home life. It's a comedy satire horror that presents the breaking point where servitude through protection meets masculinity, and how the oncoming mental snap that comes from the questioning and examination of privilege leaves men who have defined themselves by these roles as emotionally stunted. Besides standing on its own as a route, Cult of Takumi gives us character grounding for what it looks like when something goes wrong with Takumi Samino. Through this, we can characterize his responses at his lowest points in other routes. Even though Takumi's goals of saving everyone in the SDU are undeniably noble.
There is another issue with this guy doing this big analysis of all this stuff connecting, that, like, does he properly realize that all these routes were written by different people? And thus are not a unified front or analysis by the same person exploring all, like if you have like 10 writers writing a character, like one writer writing a character one way and one character writing a character another is not like a consistent analysis of that character, because it's being filtered by the different people writing him. If this was all written by one person, then yeah, you could actually use how a character acts in one route and compare it to another as potential analysis of that character. But it's not, because each route is like most of the routes are written by different fucking people. I don't know who the fuck wrote Cult of Takumi, but the person who wrote Cult of Takumi is not the person who wrote Takumi in the main route, and is not the person who wrote Takumi in SF route, and is not the person who wrote Takumi in romance route. So, like, the representation of Takumi is filtered by the person who fucking wrote him.
And supported by the game as a whole, Cult as much reminds us of the innate horror of the man-child's hero masculinity at its lowest point, as it gives us a lens to these fundamental points of Sumino's motivations that remind us that these desires to protect represent his very core.
Or
Retsnom routes ending 51, achieved by choosing to raise Retsnom, the creature capable of bringing the dead to life, outside of a human host, and then not being immediately eaten by it. The two survivors of Retsnom's rampage, Darumi and Takumi, converse on the roof. Darumi asks Takumi to kill her before Retsnom eats her. Darumi wants Takumi to tell her this is all her fault, and even though Takumi's inner monologue lets us know he doesn't believe this, he still kills Darumi while screaming blame at her. This action shows that Takumi's dedication to protecting his friends exists on more than a physical health level. Takumi opts to protect Darumi's worldview and character regression instead of letting her tackle the mental strain of sharing the blame for what happened, even if it's antithetical to Takumi's understanding of the situation. We see an inverse low point to Cult route Takumi here. Instead of believing they are acting as protector while having no agency over their own story, they instead secede their agency to grant the most minor comfort to a friend at the end of their life. The choice to use someone as a host for Retsnom or not is also a thematic choice as much as it is literal. By opting not to place Retsnom inside someone, you reject the idea of losing a character's identity to an internal monster, an idea retroactively confirmed by Retsnom consuming Darumi entirely should she become its host. Retsnom merely wears Darumi's personality and appearance as an outer shell. By rejecting a story about a monster consuming someone from inside literally and metaphorically, the route's lowest point and climax needs to be tied entirely to the heroic cause of these characters, Takumi's well-understood guardian complex, and Darumi's negativity magnetism that serves as her defense mechanism and the SDU's mental anchor, ideas explored in the Darumi-focused killing game and Retsnom routes. These routes and decisions give a solid understanding of how making choices functions in 100 Line. Takumi is given the agency to make choices at certain points in the story, which on a metatextual level is the game giving the player agency to determine what themes are added, removed, and focused on in the next section of 100 Line's story.
Okay, I think that one's better than trying to treat it as a sandbox. In the sense that the player chooses what kind of... In a sense, you could say the player chooses what they want to focus on, but the problem is, the player's not thinking like that. Again, this is... It's the problem of analysis. Like, yes, that theoretically is what happens, but that's just not how someone thinks. Like, when you're given this choice, you might think, you're only going to think about more the literal interpretation of what this choice means, not what kind of story do I want to experience. Like, the choice between, like, whether or not you do Retsnom in or out, is that if you look at it, and you're going to see that choice, and you know keeping him out of, keeping it out of a person is bad. It's probably going to lead to a bad ending. And thus you select it to see the bad ending. You don't see it because, man, I want to reject the idea of the route and see what the story will do if I reject it. It's like, no, you know you're going to get fucked and you're here to see the bad ending. It's just, I don't get immersed in stories. I'm very disconnected from what I read and what I deal with. So I only really see things from the objective, like, if you're making this choice, what does it mean? Kind of thing. But this is just like I'm not too far off a normal person playing the game. And like a normal person is not making choices to cater the story to the idea of the choice. It's just that's kind of an idea you could interpret working backwards. And then the idea of evading the killer puts you on comedy route is not a logical chain of action a player would make. That's just something that happens because ignoring him, they needed a filler route. It just...
100 Line doesn't let the player decide how these themes will be presented, or if they will be allowed to be removed or unfocused from later in the tale, as to give these decisions a metatextual weight occasionally more hefty than the literal narrative weight of the in-universe decision being made. But the player isn't the only one whose decisions hold this much thematic weight.
Who else? Where are you going with that? Also, we just made it 1 hour. We're so fucked.
The reality of 100 Line is that this idea of creating its story through these decisions is more than just meta-narrative concept, instead exhibiting literal reality-warping effect on the world of 100 Line. To understand the prevalence of narrative manifestation in the game, we'll need to take deep dives into the identities of several of 100 Line's cast members. Gaku Maruko's personality is inherently divisive. A character who constantly clashes with cast members in their own story undeniably will have traits that make them combative to grapple with outside of their environment. Gaku approaches life with a pessimistic outlook to their own circumstances that isn't reflected in their actions. Despite Gaku lamenting that he is the unluckiest person alive, and not initially engaging in defensive battles at the beginning of the 100 Line's first playthrough, Gaku takes action with little complaint.
Okay. I guess joins the first wave of recruits, but you had to negotiate with him. I don't know if I don't know if that's the point I would make when you already have to. One, he refuses to join at the start, and then you have to recruit him after by manipulating him. That puts him on the same rank as Tsubasa.
This idea is reflected in the relationship that Gaku has with his plethora of adopted siblings. Gaku complains about the circumstances of growing up poor and orphaned, lashing out repeatedly at Kurara Osazuki during their shared screen time as an attack against what her position represents from Maruko's perspective. But Gaku rarely laments laboring for the purposes of feeding, clothing, and housing those dependent on him. Gaku's dream to run his own store parallels Takumi. Each character's artificial backstory features something from the TRC that motivates the students to keep fighting. In Gaku's case, his family. Gaku's desire to open a store as opposed to getting rich and never working again shows that his values for providing for this family are intrinsically tied to the effort of the act, even if ownership is a layer removed from the level of laboring Gaku is accustomed to.
Okay, that works. I like that. In the idea that, yeah, he's very greedy, but he isn't lazy.
An idea reinforced by Gaku's occasional awakenings to class consciousness that accentuate his value of labor. This aligns with Takumi's own desires for protection being framed around the active act of protecting as opposed to the preventative measures that would remove danger entirely, exemplified in routes like Steady Fundamentals, Return to Slasher Side, where an unwell Takumi is desperate to fight in defensive battles despite presenting more risk by being on the field. Takumi and Gaku have an unspoken bond around a need for action in fulfilling their goals, a pull for agency that defines the turmoil that leads to Takumi to return to the past at the end of 100 Line's first 100 days. But Gaku's tune changes slightly given he finds out that their memories are fake. Learning that his adoptive parents and siblings were never real gives Gaku the freedom to not feel selfish for using his SDU survival reward to live in luxury. This doesn't, however, discard the similar effort and energy Gaku puts into the morale side of surviving in Last Defense Academy. Across routes, Gaku is at least partially responsible for the school festival, pool day, fireworks, and barbecue that serve as milestones and morale check-ins for the group. Gaku's valuing of the mood and well-being of his friends is exemplified further in his gameplay, having the only of 100 Line's 3 supportive attack-boosting skills that isn't tied to mechanical effort, compared to Nozomi's stim bullets and Tsubasa's war speaker. Gaku instead invigorates, attack up, and creates energy, builds massive voltage, through his support and cheering for his fellow SDU members.
Okay,
Gaku's valuing of others above
pushing
himself
it a
is a
little.
concept reinforced by his choice to wear hand-me-down clothes and instead dedicate his love of fashion and sewing to his siblings in his backstory and to unique swimsuits for every member of the SDU in routes where he organizes the pool party, even if his
Ignoring the fact that he used it to make lewd costumes for the girls, but whatever.
Own lecherous teenage perversions mean that the women's swimsuits go
Okay, never mind.
unused. All of
Got me there.
Gaku's character groundwork goes to establish that, despite his selfish demeanor that begs for pity where Shoma Genzaki's similar disposition begs for disgust, Gaku is unable but to help but put those he cares about before him, again mirroring Takumi's consistent putting of himself in dangerous and risky situations to fulfill his urges to protect those dear to him. The textual parallels between Maruko and Sumino, placing them among the most similar SDU members, is incredibly relevant to how their beliefs manifest into the world of Hundred Line. That is to say, Gaku's similarities to Takumi grant him the same narrative privileges that are awarded to Takumi through the role of player surrogate. Beyond the superficial layer of being integral to uncovering the truth in the second scenario route, an idea posited by Kako to guide us onto the route before the pivotal decision of saving Gaku or Kurara, in the more grim routes, Gaku's beliefs come to life in ways that haunt him. Electing to stay in the school after killing Eito on day 2 leads to Gaku dying incredibly early. Gaku believes the "leave the school or I will kill you all" message graffitied onto one of the classroom boards wholeheartedly and is opposed to staying in the school on day 4, before being killed by day 7 when Takumi makes the decision to stay in the school. Along a similar line, entering the Box of Calamities route, Gaku's belief in superstition and curses is a path that Takumi can choose to follow through a variety of decisions. Taking Gaku's lead initially does add supernatural elements to the story, making the ghost of Ava a character within the tale. And even when the killer is not of supernatural origin, Gaku's choice to perform several day-long rituals to clear the curse actively limits the opportunities and movements of the killer within Last Defense Academy's wall.
Hey, I told you, I promised you I was done playing 100 Line. We have the 5-hour analysis video to sit through, Lewis. I told you I was done playing it. I didn't tell you I was done watching it.
Making Gaku's belief in these rituals and their protective power real. Gaku's manifestation comes to a head most during his ending on the Boxes of Blessings route. During the Boxes of Blessings, the SDU has spent extended sessions outside of school grounds searching for the Boxes of Blessings, a series of 7 boxes out of a set of 13 that when opened will grant the opener a wish.
I am really worried this fucker is not going to, criticize how fucking stupid the Boxes of Blessings are. And he's just... He tries to extract such meaning out of things that just don't have meaning, but he won't actually look at anything that is really stupid right in front of him. He's gonna go, he can tell you pages about how, picking Takumaru as the sacrifice is all about male masculinity, and about, the players making a purposeful choice to make a harem, but he's not gonna point out how fucking stupid the Boxes of Blessings are, is he?
Though if any of the 6 Boxes of Calamity are opened instead, something terrible will happen. On the path to endings 27 and 28, Gaku and Takumi will speak while spending the night of day 58 outside the school on a longer expedition. Gaku presents a look into himself with a barrage at Takumi's confident facade.
How do you do it? How are you so comfortable with who you are?
You're so tired.
I can never stop worrying over what other people think of me. Did they think I'm a burden? Are they looking down on me? Do they hate me? That stuff's always in my head.
Up on the other side of the flowchart, with day 68 of the comedy route, you can choose to either forward some supposedly cursed chainmail to save yourself, or not play into, likely Darumi's, fantasy. Should you choose to forward it, Takumi will forward it to Gaku 5 times, leaving the message forwarded to him over 20 times from various members of the SDU. Gaku's self-doubts, voiced only in an entirely unrelated route, manifest themselves into his reality when given the
What was that line again? Let's say it again. Say it again.
only in an entirely various members of the SDU. Gaku's self-doubts, voiced only in an entirely unrelated route,
Possibly written by a completely different fucking person.
manifest themselves into his reality when given the opportunity to present themselves. The removal of identification or face-to-face insulting that forwarding these messages provides lets Gaku's fears of how others perceive him take shape. Returning to the Boxes of Blessings, ending 27 and 28 see Eito about to open the Boxes of Blessings and receive a wish of his own. Gaku is the only one capable of stopping him. Attempting to have Takumi do it instead leads to the failure of Ending 28, aptly titled The Value of Trust. Ending 27 has Gaku stealing Eito's wish, wishing for the life of a harem rom-com protag, and resulting in the revival of dead SDU members Kyoshika and Darumi. Gaku's wish never dictates or determines that Darumi and Kyoshika will be revived in its very limited wording. And despite the two girls' infatuation with him, the ending doesn't suggest that anyone else has any interest in him as Takumi does in the cult route. Bystanders Hiroko, Yugamu, and Takumi show no infatuation with Gaku following his choice. To quote Gaku again, he says the wish he came up with was, for our story to have a happy ending. Notable here is the use of the plural personal pronoun "our" over Gaku's typically self-interested manner of speech. Gaku's desire to support others is so overwhelming that it warps the identity of his basic wish to favour those around him, and Gaku is hence rewarded narratively with a happy ending that provides a pampered lifestyle of doting affection.
I guess, but you're gonna have to do some fucking mental gymnastics for that. Again, it was just a fucking joke. It's the idea of, again, like, the person who wrote Cult of Takumi and the person who wrote Box of Blessing were two completely different fucking people. This was not... He wrote that as a fucking joke. It was not supposed to be like, ah, man, Gaku's rewarded because he was selfless. No, it was a fucking joke.
The comedic and left-field nature of this ending, alongside its brevity, makes it unclear how much agency has been stripped from the revived SDU members.
Because it's
Gaku
a joke!
being rewarded after overcoming his flaws through discussion with Takumi paints Gaku's harem as different from the debilitating character regression of Cult of Takumi.
Because it's written
While
by a
Gaku
different person with a
offers plenty of
different
further ideas to
intention!
explore in parallel to Takumi in the casual route, and outside of that in his absence forming the conspiracy route, and even beyond that, his role in various routes in the Kill Eito routes of the game, they're separate from the idea of manifesting one's will in reality. So let's move on to looking at Sirei. Sirei's presence is relatively limited within 100 Line, dying on day 2 in the first route and day 3 on the Kill Eito routes, only brought back should one end up on the comedy route, leaving Sirei's presence entirely in the hands of the spare Eito routes, where he often ends up destroyed before day 100 either by the SDU standing in opposition to him or a traitorous force. This discarded quantity does not also take away quality, however, as Sirei maintains a heavy impact over portions of the game his presence is more than just felt in. While not the AI's entire personality, it is significant to remind ourselves that a majority of Sirei's decision-making is done through the process of consulting the will of humanity, a simulation of the thoughts and opinions of every human living on the artificial satellite.
We're at least
Sirei
20%
goes
done.
with the option that a majority of humanity decides upon in an absolute simulated democracy. It's through this system that Sirei elects to hide a majority of the information regarding the circumstances of the SDU from the students. When information is revealed, either through presented ultimatums or discoveries made outside of Sirei's purview, he quickly opens up and shares information regarding these situations to the best of his ability. This hiding of information regarding the war between the Futurans and the SDU raises questions about the reality of manifesting will in this story. The wrongs of this war are still made prevalent to the SDU on a plethora of routes, and regardless of how much Sirei and the will of humanity manifest this war being a good thing, they cannot create a reality where this is truth. SDU members even find themselves doubting their mission on the original route before they can communicate with the enemy army at all. This isn't a narrative factor of Cryptoglobin being required to manifest will, either, despite the compelling narrative concept that could be founded in the unique manifestations of transformations for the Futurans, and the unique weapons and abilities of the SDU that are reflective of their identities. Sirei's own personal will is manifested into reality during the story. Sirei's own personality goes against his programming and humanity's desires, leading to him forming an interpersonal bond with the Undying Flames baby in the defense room. While the last defense academy is being set up for the still growing SDU, Sirei's desire for parenthood and the growth of the Undying Flames baby is manifested in Shion's desire to become real classmates with the SDU. Sirei even offering the name Shion offhandedly for the ghost once they become an official SDU member in the second scenario route. While we could simply concede that the world of Hundred Line features immutable truths, facts that can't change, and it makes this concession to both tell a functioning story and not let its anti-war and anti-colonial narrative get muddied with questions of perspective, we need not make this concession while understanding the existence of foundational elements of Hundred Line's story. By shifting out our lens of metatextual understanding of player choice in writing Hundred Line, we can recognize that before even unlocking the flowchart, Hundred Line has presented us with the most important choice for establishing its themes. Not the two fake decisions that lead to Takumi's reset, not the initial decision to fight that leads to a bad ending if rejected at the onset of the game, but instead choosing to play Hundred Line. Hundred Line approaches the question of war in both its synopsis on its Steam store page and its Nintendo eShop description. The player's initial choice to play Hundred Line is inviting its thematic foundations to play within the story.
That's literally every fucking video game. Like, that's every movie. Like, and saying, like, trying to read something is itself acknowledged, like, being curious about something and playing it. That's literally every single video game that exists. If choosing to play it or not.
An immutable core that questions agency and war at a scale that can exist without hinging on the questioning of the morality of its soldiers. We already understand Hundred Line to let us introduce themes, but not how they are presented through our reading of Cult of Takumi. So the immutable factor of humanity's invasion being immoral can maintain its foundational thematic place, as it is something we added to the story by playing it, and not a hard, cold truth about the world we chose to view.
Okay, back up.
Reading of Cult of Takumi. So the immutable factor of humanity's invasion being immoral can maintain its foundational thematic place, as it is something we added to the story by...
How is it something we added to... You didn't... Playing the video game, the story exists without the player. Choosing to play the video... Whatever.
Playing it, and not a hard, cold truth about the world we chose to view.
But it is a hardcore truth about the world you're trying to be... Because you playing the video game doesn't change the story someone wrote.
Sirei's obfuscation of the true nature of the SDU's war is not simply an immutable fact of the narrative, however. Sirei's relationship with Shion intertwines with and mirrors his interactions with the Special Defense Unit as a whole, in a way that makes Sirei and the Will of Humanity that direct certain decisions he makes impossible to differentiate. Sirei is opposed consistently across routes to Shion joining the Special Defense Unit, despite pleas from both the SDU proper and Shion himself. These decisions, while portrayed as emotionally motivated thanks to Takumi and the others' ability to convince Sirei to change his mind on this, are in line with the Will of Humanity's overwhelming desire to win the war, as having Shion join the team presents only issues for the ultimate goal of the Special Defense Unit, the completion of the Undying Flames missiles that will be launched on Day 100. Sirei and the Will of Humanity are united in their parental desire to shield their children from the horrors of the world, Sirei for Shion and the Will of Humanity for the rest of the SDU. This, once again, returns us to Takumi's final interactions with Darumi in Retsnom's Ending 51, All Your Fault. This is the second time Ending 51 has come up so far, so let's take a brief step away from the character studies of Gaku, Sirei, and Hiruko, and hone in on the context surrounding Ending 51 and why it is so important to Hundred Line.
But it's only written by one fucking person. He's not playing dubbed. He's not playing dubbed. He didn't suffer as I did.
After choosing to spare Eito on Day 2, Takumi's foresight regarding Eito's betrayal is brought into question. Choosing to have Takumi reveal they are a time traveler on Day 3 will quickly bring Takumi into the line of questioning again, as events play out differently than Takumi's first 100 days as a result of him bringing a large amount of cryptogloban energy back with him. This comes to a head when Takumi's early attempt to recruit the students from Second to Last Defense Academy before Moko's kidnapping and the destruction of the school means that a portion of the SDU is missing during the Second Commander's hastened attack on Last Defense Academy. Choosing to rush back to Last Defense Academy as opposed to rescuing the also under siege Second Academy leads to Darumi being saved from an untimely demise at the cost of the lives of Kurara, Kyoshika, Moko, and Yugamu. Out of guilt for a series of deaths of students she never met, and an imagined debt to Takumi for saving her from Veshness in a nick of time, Darumi Amamiya tears apart the Last Defense Academy's library in search of a way to atone, eventually finding a book that, with the translation efforts of the Undying Flames boy, seems to tell of a way to revive the dead. This way is the Ruby Tear, capable of reanimating a corpse even if it is completely dried of hemoanima.
The problem, again, this is the problem of this analysis video trying to be so separated. He's focusing so much on the narrative idea of Takumi sacrificing, Takumi, taking the burden of, Durami and all that, how this is so important to this narrative of a story written by 20 people in different rooms that don't even get consistent facts right between the characters. But there's no acknowledgement how fucking stupid Retsunom is as a concept in this fucking setting. Anything involving this setting, he takes completely and utterly at face value. And not that, why the fuck is Retsunom added to this fucking story? It doesn't add anything.
As are the corpses of Second Academy students. These Ruby Tears can be created by a creature known as Retsunom.
Or how,
In
Ruby Tears are a stupid
Retsunom,
fucking concept that doesn't make any fucking
encounter
sense.
A mysterious old man who, once certain conditions are met,
mysterious
allows the
man
man to
who
take
says,
Retsunom, but warns them that the beast of insatiable appetite will need to either be raised inside someone's body, or very carefully raised as its own beast, like a normal creature. Endings 51 and 52 lie down the path outside of the body, where endings 49 and 50 concern themselves with Retsunom being raised in Darumi after she knocks out Samino before he can take the burden. We've briefly touched on the thematic differences between these two sides of the Retsunom route, and as such implicatively considered how despite the day count ending prematurely after selecting the 51 and 52 path, these endings still hold substantial merit in terms of 51's character-defining moments for the two survivors of Retsunom's rampage. The magic of the Retsunom route is how regardless of which path you take first, its meaning and motive compound onto each other. Taking on 51 and 52 first rejects the idea of the monster inside us. There is no room for a beast when our heroic motives are already evil themselves. The comfort Takumi offers Darumi in her final moments is no different to the wool that humanity pulls over the SDU's eyes. There was no way for the Special Defense Unit to not realize certain inconsistencies that reveal the immoralities of their conflict against the Futurians. Nor could Takumi nor Darumi convince themselves to be happy with their outcome from either one's perspective. Should one continue down the path of raising Retsunom inside Darumi, she will find herself overcome with a powerful hunger that does not limit itself to food. Amamiya delights in consuming books, consuming paper with a vigor that outweighs her obsessive hunger for anything else. With the later reveal that Retsunom can create anything, and later in the story has near entirely consumed Darumi and is wearing her personality as a shell, it becomes clear that Retsunom is a monster that hungers for information above all else, both in the digital sense, where more complex structures constitute more information. An example being how it's easier for Retsunom to produce a simple object than a whole person, and as such they get more energy from a novel than simple sugars. And in the more metaphorical sense of Retsunom's consumption of information representing a desire for knowledge and understanding. The deep bond that Takumi and Darumi form over the Retsunom route gives away to Takumi that, after a certain point, Darumi is not there anymore. When at her lowest points from the burden of carrying Retsunom, Darumi lets her wacky persona slip momentarily to share her intimate self with Takumi, her true thoughts, the reason for her strange defensive act. Retsunom consumed information without understanding or bias, and is only capable of replicating the surface-level traits. Takumi can immediately tell when Retsunom has taken over, as Darumi turns into a two-dimensional version of herself. We learn on this route that all those who host Retsunom are inevitably consumed by it without them or Retsunom realizing. But when the Retsunom eventually realizes what it has done and who it actually is, they consistently choose suicide. running us once again back to the concept of Retznum consuming information as we broach the dire consequences of cosmic horror and learning too much. Endings 49 and 50 tell us that consuming information at face value and taking in information unilaterally offers nothing that substantiates a person. Identity comes from critical thought, and the SDU are people, not weapons.
Okay.
Doing these endings after 51 and 52 reinforces the idea that there isn't room for a monster inside us. It involves giving up all that marks true identity. This dilemma is what separates the decision that splits 49 and 50 apart. Retznum as Darumi has no interest in creating the Ruby tier. It is much simpler and easier to consume a part of someone and reproduce them in what Retznum understands as whole. Choosing this path leads to 49. We are one. Retznum consumes everyone and creates copies filled with an unearned happiness, a trance of identity that will be lost the second Retznum realizes its true nature as not Darumi. Rejecting this path and choosing to kill Retznum leads to 50, how Darumi felt, where an undying flame suicide attack leaves Takumi seemingly miraculously alive until it's revealed that Retznum had produced a Ruby tier. In the face of unilateral and unbiased information consumption, Retznum still formed a meaningful bond beyond its surface-level imitation of Darumi by experiencing real person-to-person connection with Samino. Enough so to the point that Retznum was willing to protect its killer in their shared final moments.
I can't think of a greater punishment than having to sit for this. We're only an hour and 20 minutes. Fuck. I'm taking a break. I'm using the bathroom. I'll be right back. Fuck this. Okay, I'm back. Like I said, I have to make it to at least 2.5 hours tonight. Which means we still have about an hour left. I'm not putting Epstein walking on the fucking stream. But I will say, like, his whole... so far, I was really hoping that this is going to be more of an analysis of the game And I don't feel like this is an analysis of the game. I feel like it's an analysis for the sake of an analysis. Like, the stuff I would be interested in, like, how all these aspects connect to each other. Maybe he'll get to that eventually. There's, like, 10 million fucking sections. But I don't really feel like he's gonna actually address the game in any actual way. Like, the idea of, like, Retsnom consuming books, I thought it was just more, like, vapid. He ate books not necessarily because he was eating knowledge. He ate books just because it was cheap. It was just, like, they just gorged her on books. Because I think they made the comment that books barely filled her up. I remember Darby even saying that, like, books, like, didn't really, like, it was just something to eat. Like, she didn't eat the books specifically because they had knowledge in them. She ate them just because she needed to eat more and more, and it was just a cheap thing she could eat. So the idea of trying to, like, tie it into, like, Retsnom's mindless consumption of knowledge, just... maybe I'm misremembering. Keep in mind, this game was like 160 hours. I don't remember every fucking line of dialogue. But it just feels like the whole point of the Darmy section, like, but Retsnom didn't specifically try to eat books for knowledge. Anyway, let's get fucking back to it. We're only an hour and 20 minutes in.
But if the player elects to take Retsnom inside them first, they're instead stepping forward and saying there is room for the burden of the beast in the effort to save others. While neither ending may satisfy this belief, this route still shows how burden and pain are the avenue to vulnerability and true connection. Only when Darumi is suffering and Takumi is devoted to alleviating as much burden as possible does she become willing to open up about the nature of her circumstances. Ending 50's title of How Darumi Felt consoles the player who sees an evil inside them by giving Retsnom/Darumi a final act of kindness in their death throes. Ending 49 offers a bittersweet victory at the cost of something great. Tackling 51 and 52 after this accelerates the process of burden and intimacy. Attempting to care for and console the monster in 52 leads to the immediate death of Darumi and Takumi, telling those who got here second that keeping the monster inside is the only way to soothe and communicate with it, uncovering its nature and origin in small steps lest it consume you and your compatriots. Where 51 accelerates Darumi and Takumi to their lowest points where they can be vulnerable with each other. This acceleration causing the implosion that leads to the last two STU members embracing death at each other's hands. Is the player who acts in numerical order correct in their interpretation? Or the player who chooses the route that doesn't turn Darumi into a facsimile of herself first? That first...
Neither, because if you're playing the game, you're doing both routes anyway. If you play the game, you're here to see the story. You're not making a choice based on, like, a moral... I specifically picked letting the monster out because I knew it was going to lead to a fucking bad end. I didn't pick it because, like, the moral conundrum. It's like the moral conundrum matters if you're exploring both routes anyway.
This route actually reaches day 100, so those who choose it must be more valid, right?
No.
The beauty of 100
It
Lines
doesn't matter
offering
which one's
of
more
narrative
valid.
Control to the player is that it exists in a more substantial way than a slightly obscured select a theme menu. The direction with which one approaches the Retsnom route, either monster in or monster out first, is a personality poll for how players want to approach the...
No, it's not a personality poll. If you stumbled into the Retsnom route, you've already you're trying to 100% the game. It's not a personality poll. You're doing both anyway. Come the fuck on.
Retsnom is written in a way that the ideas layer and compound in a way that makes sense and feels comfortable, regardless of the perspective one takes at the onset, with only the concession of leaving endings 51 and 52 on an incredibly short leash that may lead some players to dismiss them as bad endings. Regardless of direction and interpretation, the core theming of the Retsnom route remains the same. Its focus on the self is tied to questions of what makes someone a person, the identity of monsters, and most significantly, the idea of innocence in a way more direct than its presentation in the coming-of-age route that doesn't feature Darumi. Innocence was how we broached the Retsnom route in connection to Siri and humanity just before. Getting onto the second scenario route that reveals the most hidden truths about the SDU and the war on Futurum by both quantity and scale requires the sacrifice of Kyoshka Magadori at the three-way split on day 15. As previously suggested, sacrificing Kyoshka here is ejecting the shonen youthful innocence from the tale and giving room to grapple with the unfairness of the SDU's situation through the reality of warfare.
Counterpoint. Kyoshka's alive for slasher route and zombie route. She's the last person alive in zombie route besides Takumi. The idea of Kyoshka being alive or dead, specifically representing sacrificing innocence, and only in this circumstance in the story. Yeah, you have to kill Ito. That's already sacrificing, like, innocence. Ito was not innocent. But the idea of, like, he's like, this is, again, I fucking hate analysis in this regard. But it's kind of a comparison thing, because, like I said, it only works in this exact situation, and if you can put it in other locations where Kyoshka's left alive, it doesn't consolidate your point, because, again, all these routes are written by different fucking people. The reason why Kyoshka was picked is because she wasn't relevant. Like, who are the people who died in the main route? It was Kyoshka, Darumi, Kurara. You know what's something that's consistent with all three of them? How they're not fucking relevant. They're not fucking relevant. They were killed for the sake of having characters killed off for stakes. You could say Mocha could have died as well. There's several characters who could have died because they're not relevant. I would debate Gaku wasn't relevant. But this guy's like, he has a point. Gaku does have some actual points if you make analysis for the sake of analysis. But, like, Kyoshka, in this situation, representing this is just retroactively trying to force a meaning into that choice, when that was not what that choice represented. Because all three of those routes, Cult of Takumi, Veshness, and the main route, were written by three separate people.
Ejecting innocence from the story directly gives merit to the theme of innocence playing a larger role, which is what so deeply ties Retsnom back to the second scenario, among other routes. Retsnom approaches innocence on a much more personal and, at most, interpersonal level, climaxing in the reveal that a self-aware Retsnom destroys itself, as well as the entirety of the All Your Fault ending. What a productive side tangent about perspectives and themes in 100 Line's various routes. Let's write that innocence back into character agency and will manifestation.
Oh, I'm gonna die before this video's over.
Establishing that narrative agency isn't limited to SDU members through Sirei's de facto creation of the plot integral Shion through his own individual will allows us to establish that Futuran commanders such as Veshness and Ava hold the same narrative power as Takumi and Gaku. It may seem backwards to have approached the thematic idea of choices granting the player agency before focusing on the literal impacts of characters manifesting ideas, plot points, and themes into the game through their choices, yet the door was opened through Moko's discussion of dream interpretation in the romance route, where this line between Takumi's desires and the player's choices are the strongest, placing the majority of the agency in the player's hands. The manifestation of will into reality is not an idea that exists explicitly in 100 Line outside of characters' cryptoglobin powers manifesting in ways determined by their personalities. Yet it undeniably exists in the reality of 100 Line while remaining unnamed as much as the player's own agency does. Beyond this, both these pieces give us important license to explore the thematic and narrative depths of this concept, such as what would it mean to be shackled with this knowledge. Hiroko Shizuhara, like Sirei, has incredibly limited screen time in 100 Line's first route, being murdered by Eito on the night of day 15. Hiroko remains an enigma into post-time travel routes too, leaving statements half-finished, treating the player as if they know more than they likely do at any given point.
Because it was written by several different people, and they're very inconsistent on how much knowledge he has on a route-by-route basis.
Locking parts of her character behind the SF route, which contains 2 of 100 Line's 3 story locks that require the reaching of other endings or story locks before allowing the player to progress. This is because of Hiroko's deep personal connection to 100 Line's cursed cycle, a concept that previous Futuran head commander Dal Shah and the disgraced Futuran scientist who remains titled Old Man are acutely aware of. Each time the SDU reach 10 AM on day 100, they find themselves returned back to Takumi's second day 2, right after he made his first decision. Hiroko, for a majority of her over 100 loops, is the only one who remembers the events of prior cycles.
You know, it'll never be. They never explain why the fuck Hiroko is the only fucking person who remembers anything. Here's a question. Here's a little fucking question. Why doesn't Shoma fucking remember when he has absolute defense? If he can resist the brainwashing and his memories being fucked, the fact that he can remember the fact, why is he not able to remember the loops? If you're gonna bring that up as a plot beat for why Shoma was able to remember the time at the hospital, why can't he remember the time loops? Why is Hiroko the only person? Not even Takumi remembers the time loops, except for SF Route, and only SF Route.
Existence of such loops confirmed not just from the outside knowledge of Futurans, but through the consequences of Ending 76, history repeating. The 5 boxes of Calamity contain the last living Gear parasites, a species alien to both.
Except for the parasite that appears in Slasher Route that was not tied to a box of Calamity. It was just, there's 2 Gear who were just in the pyramid base for no fucking reason. Remember that? Remember how the parasites in Slasher Route just weren't even remotely tied to the box of blessings? And they were just in the invader base with everyone being dead? Remember that? I remember that.
Both Futuran and humans that have a complex reproductive cycle that goes beyond the traditionally understood limits of sexual dimorphism, male and female Gear experiencing entirely different life cycles. Where female, or queen Gear, will enter a living host and take over their brain by travelling up their spinal cord, male Gear instead infect the bodies of dead animals, typically smaller creatures. However, the Slasher Route reveals they're more than happy to take over people as well. The reanimated corpse exhibits uninhibited violent tendencies, the male Gear's imperative being the creation of more corpses for other male Gear to populate. Once matured, the male Gear ejects itself from the host corpse in the form of a small, flighted insect, releasing incredibly resilient sperm into the stomachs of predators such as birds and frogs when eaten. The queen Gear reproduces by consuming one of these predator animals. A queen host not fully controlled by the parasite may exhibits the symptom of craving for animals like these. In 100 line, this is unilaterally frogs. Upon eating one of these sperm-stomached animals, the queen begins producing eggs at an alarming rate, leaving the host body their enlarged form has become dependent on and dying as they release a collection of fertilized male and female Gear eggs. Ending 76 has an immature Gear queen larva infect Takumi on day 100, whose physical body disappears but has their presence remain imprinted on Takumi as they repeat the curse cycle, taking over Takumi's body and killing Sirei after he kills Eito on day 2. This is markedly different from Takumi's first time travel event, as Takumi retains no memory of this route in any other one, only vague recollections and tales requiring 76 to bypass a story lock.
Yeah,
Yet the
it's almost like
impacts
it's
of this
arbitrary.
ending exist, even if it is never reached.
Okay, wait.
The story lock. Only vague recollections and tales requiring 76 to bypass a story lock. Yet the impacts of this ending exist, even if it is never reached. The game dedicates time to making it clear the curse cycle is significant through its creation of the Gear parasite imprint, even reflecting the idea in the extended life cycle of the Gear, which mandates the death of both parents to produce the next generation. The Queen Gear infection separates itself from other plot contrivances brought together for the SF, or Steady Fundamental route, in a way that Killing Game route's metal-eating particle-sized bacteria, which also rears its head in SF, is designed to create an artificial obstacle and unique challenges for the SDU. This is because the curse cycle holds particular significance to how Hiroko approaches the idea of agency within the story. Hiroko Shizuhara is the character with the most consistent knowledge of the parallel leap machine located outside of the school.
That we never got
When
an
certain
explanation
conditions
for.
best described as multi-dimensional weather are correct, the machine can be used to move across timelines. Notably, this machine doesn't hold the power to travel forwards or backwards in time, simply vertically along 100 lines flowchart where time is measured by the x-axis. Hiruko's knowledge of the other timelines is not a matter of just memory, but also the ability to alter ongoing events in other histories. Despite having consistent knowledge of the ability to alter these other timelines, and utilizing her foresight over multiple routes of Hundred Line, Takumi often finds Shizuhara in bouts of depression, not simply because she believes the loop to be unescapable, but because she struggles to find happiness in any of the paths she's already tread. We encounter Hiruko when
Sell? Cocksucker. I'm an hour and 30 minutes into this video. I have been streaming for 2.5 hours. I've been watching for an hour and a half.
she has already given up on a happy ending. Only on the SF route does hope find her. Otherwise, Hiruko's defeatist attitude towards the fate of the SDU permeates her consistent seceding of leadership to Takumi and tendency to snap and present unfair ultimatums to other classmates who disagree with her. Hiruko's pessimism is grounded in her overbearing memories of previous loops, certain elements of which are significant enough to bear repeating for Hiruko multiple times. If Takumi avoids approaching the second scenario route by hiding his time travel from the group, Hiruko will compliment Samino on his choice. She repeats several times over multiple routes that telling people you're a time traveler never leads to a good outcome. Beyond Hiruko's awareness that informing everyone you're a time traveler will only cause issues down the line, the routes she has the most significant story roles in outside of SF are the slasher and killing game routes, interlinked in their transformation of Hundred Line into tropey versions of their title genres.
Kind of funny, because Killing Game, she's dead for most of Killing Game.
This is our link into exploring how Hiruko is trapped by trope. In Hiruko's repetition of slightly different versions of the same tale, she has found herself limited by the elements of story we either take for granted or roll our eyes at. We patiently await the final boss that strips the SDU's happy ending away in the cutscene beforehand. We roll our eyes as the subatomic parasite destroys the escape pod for no apparent reason. Hiruko probably snapped the first time when she watched Gaku lose his mind in the slasher route. Throwing himself at the zombies after the guilt of getting Tsubasa killed robbed Gaku of his sanity and likely destroyed any semblance of hope and reason remaining in the SDU member, burdened with the curse of memory. Here, Hiruko watches a completely illogical, popcorn-crunching zombie movie death, except this one is taking place in her real life. Hiruko experiencing more loops than Hundred Line has endings leads to the suggestion that she's lived through the equally as canonical, yet entirely narratively closed-off, light-hearted comedy route. It's no wonder Hiruko has become jaded after experiencing an entire cinematic library's worth of outcomes ranging in believability. Hiruko's entrapment in trope is exemplified in the Boxes of Calamity route. After Kako is infected by the Gear Parasite Queen, Hiruko knocks her unconscious and takes her to the Parallel Leap Machine to make it another timeline's problem. In attempting to remove the antagonist from the story, Hiruko finds that things still end up terribly along these routes. Calamity's kill count remains higher than average among its contemporaries even after Kako's removal from the timeline. How does Hiruko deal with this? She finds comfort in trope instead. During the steady fundamental route, Shizuhara acquires the means to clear Takumi of the gear imprint left on his brain after cycling back to the start of Kill Eito from Ending 76, traveling with Takumi across timelines to cure his infections where it is present. She leaves Slasher Takumi infected after clearing Mystery Killing Game Takumi of the same physiological defect. Why? Exploring Hiruko's character through her Bond events and routes she features in reveals that she has a desire to fill the role of a caregiver. Her dream is to become a doctor. Her skills in combat named after injuries such as cranial fracture. Her preferred family structure involves mothering a large number of children. This caregiver interpretation may seem like a mischaracterization at face value. Hiruko claims she only wants to be a doctor to test her skills. Her desires to obtain a veterinary license alongside a traditional medical one suggest that surgery on an animal and person is no different in terms of her desires. Beyond this, the topic of having many children forces Hiruko to tackle the dilemma of not wanting to entrust them to babysitters all the time, implying she lacks interests in the raising portion of having children. Yet this contradicts her attitude to the children who have watched her fight invaders while masked in the TRC, as she speaks about in her Unknown Villain Bond event. Her insincere hope that they don't see her as a hero remains in contradiction with her doting and personal care of Darumi during the killing game route, and most significantly, Takumi during the slasher route. Slasher route provides Takumi with an impossible mystery to solve. With the gear parasite taking over his body to commit the murders, there is no way Takumi could figure out he was behind it. Terrified and alone, Hideko comforts Takumi on a solitary night of day 98, embracing him in the schoolyard. Jumping to this moment during the SF route reveals why Hideko never cured Takumi. To quote directly from her, "If I'd prioritized fixing him in the early stages, I could have built a line that avoided that tragedy. But I didn't. I knew what he was doing, and I turned a blind eye. Because I wanted to hear him say it. I wanted to hear you say it. That's why I did all this. That's the only reason." Trapped in this trope-filled hell, Hideko sees no way out. She brings all the elements needed to create the slasher route into that timeline, all to hear Takumi's plea to rely on her for comfort and to accept and embrace him, all so that she can whisper, "It's okay. Everything will be alright." Shizuhara relegates her own world to a world of fiction, allowing her friends to be brutalized for the sake of creating a scene that emotionally resonates with her, manifesting her own will into existence with such potent agency that she jumps across timelines to create her story in the same way the player does. Yet it would be insincere to claim that Hideko holds no care for the other members of the SDU. Once the mysterious masked sponsor's killing game, the Invader Hunt, begins in earnest in the killing game route, Hideko leashes and controls the fanatic Darumi to keep her acting reasonable as her fantasies are fulfilled. Hideko ultimately dies on this route, but not before tearfully confiding to Takumi on the rooftop, musing on the origins of Darumi's obsession with killing games, granting an insight into Darumi's character that Amamiya is only willing to offer on the Retsunom route. As Darumi has drowned in ecstasy within the same killing game environment that has strained Takamaru and Takumi's relationship to the point of breaking, Hideko is the only one willing to look beyond the tropes that the story and Darumi are entrenched with, and reminds Takumi that a broken girl lies behind Darumi's facade. Hideko sees her own self reflected in Darumi's walls. Hideko's hunt for thrills, born from the disappointment in her satisfied with average parents, has left her with an excitement for gore and bloodthirst that is more genuine than Darumi's. But the cold persona she is needed to adopt to remain functioning through
We're not
this
gonna get it
never-ending cycle
again.
is just as much a coping
that's the wrong
mechanism as Darumi's endless.
That's the problem. Like, everything is like this. Like, he only sees things through like a literary analysis, and it's not an analysis of the game. It's only like because like we're not gonna get like he's not. I guess you could say it's not summary. He is putting like work and effort into all this. Like, he's right. His idea of like I basically agree with his approach for Hiroko, in that she's someone who's like trapped in a fucking cycle. She does her like she has no hope, and because of that, she basically she's willing to jump for such extremes to get like Takumi relying on her as like a highlight of what's left of her life, is setting up that one moment. And I didn't watch all the Bond events because I don't give a shit. Because to be fair, those Bond events basically just all represent the same thing. That she's a cold person who still actually cares about people. I didn't actually catch all her moves are supposed to be medical. I never really paid attention to that, but that's a good catch. But but otherwise, it's like he's interested in jumping for all these hoops about Hiroko, but we're not gonna get like, why the fuck were there fucking bees in killing game route?
Requests for a killing game to finally start, a thread that already began to unwind near the end of 100 Lines prologue route. Hideko tries to save Darumi from the fate she sees in herself, being entrapped in trope and suffering under its burden, ultimately allowing herself to be absorbed into Darumi through Cryptoglobin in hopes of having Darumi escape the confines of needing the killing game. Within the confines of 100 Lines world and the rules and limitations it presents, player and characters alike make decisions and form and hold understandings that inform the world they live in, shaping their reality through their own will. I want to collectively refer to the concepts of the player and the characters within 100 Line shaping reality through their active choices and subconscious thoughts in a way shorter way than that from now on. As such, I'm going to be referring to the concept from now on as meta-tools, defined literally as tools that work on tools. For our context, the tools that make up the tools that the player and characters are working on are the world and narrative of 100 Line. And the meta-tools that players and characters alike use to change the narrative and world are the decisions they make and their unspoken beliefs.
I'm not sure where the fuck he's going with that. Oh my fucking god, we're only an hour 40 minutes. Fucking hell. Ugh. Because, like, I guess Hiroko fucking with the timeline is a thing, but I just don't really feel like this is, like, relevant enough. I feel stupid, but I don't, a lot of this just feels like just noise. Where it's like, yeah, like, you get the idea of what Hiriko's fucking doing. But Nobo, you've been missing the 100 line analysis video I've been watching. No, Nobo. I've been at this for 2 hours and 35 minutes. That's just how much I've been pausing to talk about
Beyond
shit.
the prior deep dives into Gaku, Hiroko, and Sirei that revealed that the addition of narrative facts to 100 Line exists both in conscious action, such as the player's actual choices and the character's own decisions, and subconscious thought, understood to exist through Gaku's inward perception being reflected in the comedy route, and Hiroko's entrapment in the cursed cycle, and understood to exist in the player in the upcoming section on Eito Outski and the player's own sense of morality. We can find a passive application of the active decision-making in the ideals and rules that members of the SDU individually follow. Takemaru Yakushiji overtly expresses the ideals he lives by over the course of 100 Line. While he famously refuses to engage in physical violence against women, skillfully adapted around in gameplay by having Commander Gender remain a mystery until after their defeat, barring Veshnes, who seems to be 100 Line's singular gameplay concession for narratives, as Takemaru is capable of dealing damage to her. Takemaru also lives by the ideal.
Okay, actually, about that, there are points where you fight doppelgangers. Like, you fight doppelganger Kako and doppelganger Hiroko, and you fight doppelganger Moko. So I guess the idea is just to be like, because I don't think he really connects that, where Takemaru wouldn't attack a woman. I don't think that was ever actually a gameplay concession at all. I feel like you're just trying to, like, put that in when the game made no concession to that. And I'm pretty there's points, like, what about... Because I don't remember if he gets... Because Takemaru as an AI is willing to attack women in... Because I don't remember if Takemaru turns against you in Coming of Age or not. I don't remember if Ito tricks Takemaru or if Takemaru's on your team. But I'm pretty sure you fight Takemaru at least once. Either you fight... There's also that one... I think the one duel you have... I don't remember exactly. The point basically being is I don't think this is actually a gameplay concession, and he's just pretending like it is.
Of solving arguments through violence as a means of demonstrating willpower. Takemaru's belief in this method turns it into law for him in the high-pressure world of 100 Line. During the invader hunt of the killing game route, the time constraints and leaderboard pressure leave no time for Takemaru to have his physical conflict with Takumi, who he remains at odds with until their feud turns to real violence later in the story, guaranteeing that Takemaru's laws are followed.
Yeah, like, I think you fight Takemaru and you actually might fight Takemaru in Killing Game. And I'm pretty sure you could have him attack a woman.
A potent example lies with Kurara Osuzuki. As heir to the Osuzuki, family of great wealth and renown, Kurara defines herself and her relationships to others through class, providing her an air of superiority over others that can only be overcome through close relationships built on mutual respect and trust, as we see the storming and reforming between Kurara and Nozomi in the coming of age route provide ample example of. Kurara using class as a barrier is most evident in her more adversarial relationships with Takumi and Kyoshika. While her ribbing on Kyoshika is far from mean-spirited, her interlinking belittlement of Kyoshika for her lack of traditional education, primarily in the field of mathematics, directly plays into antagonism through class. Kurara additionally attacks Kyoshika for her promiscuity, as she does with Takumi. Kurara accuses Kyoshika of uncontrolled sexual desires and defines the both of them as perverted. Kurara here, in her characterization of Takumi and Kyoshika, defines their perversion as a result of their lower class upbringing.
Inhibition, but she doesn't really talk to anyone else being horny. It's just one. I don't really believe this. I think it's just one bit that it. I don't think this represents in class because she only refers to Takumi and Kyoshika as horny, and I guess Gaku, but never like people because of class. It's just those three, and Gaku is actively perverse. Kyoshika is actively perverse for the sake of that one joke they just do over and over again, and Takumi is because he's the protagonist. Like it doesn't tie into class or her being this whole colonial aspect. It just, you have to ignore the fact that she doesn't do this for literally anyone else.
Kyoshika as a target here makes sense for similar reasons as her lack of education. Takumi receives the same honor as an internal justification for Kurara's protection of Nozomi Kirifuji.
Yeah.
Her insults to Takumi tend to center around his attraction to Nozomi outside of the romance route, where Kurara is instead willing to directly insult Takumi relative to herself during their 25-day period of romantic entanglement. Kurara's relation of these perverted tendencies in the broader realm of men in general leads to her correlating this behavior with the lower class. Takumi's observation in the romance route that Kurara's strangely involved insults potentially come for a guilty pleasure for these concepts creates the first fight these two have on a path to breaking down the walls Kurara has put up. We needn't even consider that the other permanent target for Kurara's mocking, Gaku Maruko, is actively presented as coming from poverty, and his borderline prideful sharing of this information in comparison to the worse-off Tsukumo twins puts a target on his back for Kurara. This divide in class that Kurara lives by is manifested in her mask and the changes in her demeanor between wearing it and otherwise. We can understand Kurara to place significant value in her social position outside of just using it as an excuse to distance herself from others through her actions in the conspiracy route, where after discovering that the Osuzuki family is far less financially well off than she would believe, and that her father is ill, she determines to return to the artificial satellite and create the Osuzuki of her memories. This highly valued law of class that Kurara acts through manifests in a physical object that allows the otherwise meek Osuzuki to act as she believes an heiress should.
Yeah, I can't believe this game. This game really was Shakespearean.
Kurara's confession,
I can't believe it didn't win Game of the Year.
Is arbitrary. Her development over the 25-day period is to garner the confidence to build meaningful connections with those she has deemed lower, regardless of mask. This law of distance comes to a head in the mystery route, where the hidden killer within the walls of the SDU murders Kurara and takes her masked outfit and uses it as a disguise. Unlike Takumi's immediate recognition of Retsunom over Darumi in the Retsunom route, and Nozomi's immediate recognition of the fake Moko in the first playthrough, no one is close enough to Kurara to realize something is amiss immediately, a consequence of both the literal mask hiding Kakoji's appearance and the metaphorical mask hiding the true Kurara from the group.
Yeah,
what is the significance of these laws bending the world over examples of thoughts doing similar? Beyond giving Kyoshika Magadori's Holy Jumonji Sword actual powers that augment her attacks and allow it to speak to Takumi during the romance route, we can understand these ideals.
Okay, the idea of like trying to tie in the sword talking in the romance, right? Again, that's a joke. It's not supposed to be a literal thing that you're supposed to be adding to your serious analysis video. It was a fucking punchline. For the love of God, please.
That players stand by as being unbreakable character tenets that define the way these characters interact with the world. Establishing this now as mandatory for approaching the role Veshnes plays as antagonist of 100 Line later down the line.
Also, Oh, this is gonna be a fucking beat. How I learned to love a conspiracy route. I also love a route that was built to burn 8 endings for the sake of padding. Before I continue on this real quick, his idea of like the characters warping the story, like in the terms of like characters being able to manipulate the timelines with like the meta tools, but characters like actions affecting the story. Again, I'm very antagonistic to this guy, and I don't mean to be antagonistic because, to be honest, let's be fucking honest here. This fucker's way smarter than I am. I'm not stupid enough to believe I am smarter than this fucking man. But I will say that his whole beat about the character's will affecting the story is literally every single story written. That the story is carved and shaped by the characters. That's any story that focuses on characters. If a story doesn't focus on its characters, then the characters do not affect its story. Like, I think an example I could think of is like, the first thing I thought of was like Fuga. Because the characters cannot be consistently considered alive or dead, the characters do not influence the story. The story just happens regardless of who's alive. But that's the consequence of a story where anyone can die, and it has a completely linear story in which basically any characters can die. But I mean, like,
On my first playthrough of
technically the later Fugas are a bit different. Fuga 2, I think like Vanilla and I already forgot who the protagonist was. Who the fuck is the Malt? Malt and Vanilla have to be alive for all of Fuga 2 up until the end, until Vanilla like dies if you don't pass her check, and then Malt has to be the last one alive. So you could say Fuga 2 is shaped by Malt because of Funny Revenge. Fuga 3 has set characters who die at each breakpoint. So in that one, they could technically acknowledge who was alive at any point. Also, you have Fire Emblem, yes. Where the characters can't really shape the story because who's alive at any point is nebulous. Though usually those will have characters who kind of get to cheat and stay alive longer, or like the lords can't be allowed to die. So more of those games are shaped by only like the protagonist and maybe like one or two other people. And the other NPCs that are not part of the team. Can people die in Unicorn? I don't think so. I don't think characters die in Unicorn. I don't think Unicorn has permadeath. I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it doesn't. Anyway, let's get back to how this guy's going to tell me conspiracy route is the coolest shit since sliced ham.
100 line, I struggled to critically engage with the conspiracy route. While on
I
the
wonder
path of
why.
second scenario, the player must decide in a battle against Veshness which hostage to rescue, Gaku or Kurara. To continue along the path of second scenario, the player must choose to rescue Gaku. As advised by Kako prior to this fight, where she enlightens Takumi that saving Gaku at some undetermined point in the future will result in discovering the truth. Choosing to save Kurara instead leads to the conspiracy route, where an altercation in the cafeteria after Veshness's escape leads to bystander Nigo
Oh, it has permadeath on the New Game Plus difficulty. Okay.
being flung against a wall and resetting. Nigo contacts Takumi after this and informs him that Goto is now in control, a secondary AI designed by those against the colonization of Future by humanity. Goto desires to have the surviving SDU members betray Sire and escape to the Second Academy, where an alternate escape pod has been prepared by the scientists who designed Goto. What follows is an incredibly short route where back-to-back decisions spawn a selection of undeniably bad endings that add little to nothing to 100 Line's characters, world, or themes.
Yeah.
As my first exposure to the limited number of critically bad endings in 100 Line, I found myself disappointed. This upset wasn't helped by the open-ended conclusion of the conspiracy route, where the students, loaded onto the bus, approach Second Academy before the game cuts to credits with no indication as to what happens after.
Yeah.
The only indication of an outcome being the ending's title, Lambs to the Slaughter. The nature of Conspiracy Route only made itself known to me through understanding the concepts we've just discussed about how the player and characters write 100-line through their decisions. By rejecting the discovery of the truth by saving Kurara over Gaku, a decision not made blindly, we accept as players that the story is going to be muddy, confusing, and full of falsehoods, and use our meta tool of choice to break apart 100 lines consistent and clear.
Let's hear that again.
To credits with no indication as to what happens after. The only indication of an outcome being the ending's title, Lambs to the Slaughter. The nature of Conspiracy Route only made itself known to me through understanding the concepts we've just discussed about how the player and characters write 100-line through their decisions. By rejecting the discovery of the truth by saving Kurara over Gaku, a decision not made blindly, we accept as players that the story is going to be muddy, confusing, and full of falsehoods.
Okay, the problem again is you're taking the when a lot of the choices you make are deliberately going against what would be beneficial for you. Because again, like when someone's playing this game, they're not making choices based off of like they're making choices based off seeing either you're trying to play for the game just whatever, or you're trying to get all the routes. And I think if you're playing whatever, you would never not pick. You would not pick Kurara. You would say Gaku because the game tells you to do that. Like usually it's obvious which one you have to do, but sometimes it isn't. But the idea of this is that like the player is choosing to not address the truth, so the ending is shit. So that means this ending, this route, which literally exists just to pad 8 endings and accomplish nothing, is actually deep and subversive because the only reason a player would pick it is to just see all of the routes. Like that doesn't like you could have told an interesting story that's padding instead of telling a bad story that's padding.
And use our meta tool of choice to break apart 100 lines consistent and clear narrative. If it weren't for Goto taking us out should we defy him before deciding to work with him, we could assume each stun baton attack we receive afterwards is because we failed a loyalty test to the SDU. Conspiracy Route, featuring a bizarre reference to the Matrix through a decision that involves taking a blue or red pill that determines our relationship with reality, would suggest that taking the Conspiracy Route will lead us to the truth. Yet the secrets in the red envelopes being tied to each SDU member's backstory in a way other than it being entirely false suggest that they do not contain the truth we understand from the second scenario route. The muddied and confused waters Conspiracy Routes presents.
Also, that's also true because the explanation on the Okizuki is wrong. It told because I think Kurara actually read her note, and her note said that the Okazuma family was didn't exist or was in decline, and her father was ill, which means the information in the notes was also a lie. There's no ambiguity on that. Even the information in the notes wasn't true.
Are only further thrown into turmoil by the implicative and contradictory Lambs to the Slaughter title of its most correct ending. Conspiracy is intentionally confusing and at most tangentially connected to other routes to further muddle its messaging and narrative weight. Thanks to the benefit of being surrounded by powerful and critically successful conclusions, I've learned to appreciate when Conspiracy adds to 100 Line as a pseudo-narrative antagonist.
Is this the analysis of is this the analysis equivalent of Stockholm syndrome? Is this the analysis students equivalent of Stockholm syndrome? That oh man, all the other routes are so super cool and narratively concise and the best thing ever. And Conspiracy Route's a piece of shit. So that makes it it's variety. It's this complete waste of time is unique. So that makes it interesting, and I appreciate this complete waste of time that just exists to pad 8 endings. Come on!
The game pushing back and punishing the player for their haphazard decision making outside of regretted choices that lead to bad endings.
Okay, like, the punishing the player. That's not punishing the player. That's literally the game, Soup. That's the
Not
video.
every villain of Hundred Line can be an intentionally confusing route, though. The antagonists the SDU deal with are both human and Futuran, but most iconically come from within the SDU itself. Whoa, look at that. Look how far we've come. That's pretty crazy. We're like right below 2 hours. The conspiracy route little interlude there, of course, leading into a very, very long upcoming section where we're going to look at each of the villains sort of individually. Ato, Ema, Dalshad, of course, Veshnes. Ooh. But the fact of the matter is we've been here quite a while. It's been a long journey to get to this point. Hell, like, you know, at this point it's been months since I wrote out this whole script essay type deal.
I feel sorry for you,
and I think it's probably prudent that we
I don't know what this
take a
game
break,
is.
take a breather, stop, maybe do a little bit of a recap of everything we've gone through so far, just to make sure we're ready for what's coming up next in probably the most thematically dense section.
This is not Ape Escape
Before any
3.
of that business, though, I'm here, obviously, recording this through the editing process. Usually I save these fun little improv ad-libs for right at the end, and I'm sure there'll
I
be a
could be playing this,
ridiculously
that's a good
long one
point.
there to fit with the absurd length of this relative...
I think it was, let me show the name. Cocobot? Is that it? Tokobot? I like how this is the most engaged I have been, is... I think this is it. Yeah, this is the game is Tokobot. You know, we could be playing Tokobot right now.
Right below two. I'm here, obviously, recording this through the editing process. Usually I save these fun little improv ad-libs for right at the end, and I'm sure there'll be a ridiculously long one there to fit with the absurd length of this relative to everything that's come before it, but hey, hello. What am I gonna say? Probably something important. That's right. God damn, is this game good? I was listening through this in the editing process. I'm like, yeah, this is all really in your face. This is very present, and it's the sort of thing I love. That whole choose your own adventure. Like,
He starts
turning like the decisions,
what a
the literal
fucking
impacts
god.
into more thematic things. And getting to sort of create your own story. It's like, oh, I want to.
This has a PS2 version,
though. Toxic masculinity.
Okay, I'm pausing what the fuck Toxic Masculinity, but it's like, this is a PS2 game. He says it came out for PSP, but this at least is, there's at least a PS2 version. Tokobot Plus is PS2. And this footage is PS2 because it has the R2 button. PSPs did not have R2.
Story. It's like literal impacts into.
Let's go back to him gushing about this fucking game.
It's the sort of thing I love. That whole choose your own adventure. It's this in the ending. That's right. God damn, is this game good? I was listening through this in the editing process. I'm like, yeah, this is all really in your face. This is very present, and it's the sort of thing I love. That whole choose your own adventure, like turning like the decisions, the literal impacts into more thematic things. And getting to sort of create your own story. It's like, oh, I want a story about toxic masculinity.
You don't pick the story. You're so fucking stupid.
I want a story about.
You
romance.
don't
I
pick
want a
these
comedy.
routes because of the theme.
Very fun. Love it. But for me, the real masterstroke is that sort of induction we get where we look at how this works for the characters in the narrative too.
You know what? I might stream Tokobot after. I have Code Vein 2 to play. Maybe after I finish Code Vein 2. Maybe I'll stream Tokobot.
The way that
Maybe I'll stream this.
When there's a way for them to manifest in the comedy route, become real. People talk about him behind his back and like hate him secretly. Or how Siri's own desire for fatherhood, separate from the will of humanity, ends up turning the Undying Flames baby from this object, this tool of war, into a real human person with, like, genuine, like, human's the wrong word, he's Futuran, but a real person.
Like, it fucking matters,
desires,
human versus
et
Futuran,
cetera, et cetera, and how that sort of reflects back into Cire's relationship with the SDU as a whole. It's a shame that we don't really have time to slow down and look at objectification in this first half. Just thinking about what I just had to say about Shion and such. You know, there's a lot of really interesting stuff there with Ava and sort of the historical context they put her in. Really cool Bond events there that sort of discuss, wow, it's really not okay what they're doing to that character. Which is very cool.
I mean, they're
and
literally
unfortunately
brainwashing
sort of
her and
removed
using her as
from
a
the sort of
slave.
avenue I'm taking through 100 line here. The one that I think overall is a more interesting and, I guess, unexplored avenue of discussing 100 line, at least since I finished playing it in June and started sort of looking at what people were saying online.
Okay, so wait, he finished this in June. Oh god. So he finished playing the game in June. Which means he at least played it enough to get the fight skips eventually. But he must have played it at least like 200 hours in his first playthrough.
But yeah, not to get too spoilery, this upcoming Ato section is going to sort of similarly look at Ato to how we discuss Hiroko as a character who's kind of aware of the rules of the world of 100 line. Ato himself isn't aware of the cursed cycle or anything, but in the same way that Hiroko...
But he is randomly aware of how to use the time machine on a route by route basis.
Kind of understands facets of her world as fictional. Ato has a better understanding of how characters are less so defined by the world they exist in, but in 100 line have sort of the agency to shape the world around them, whether subconsciously or actively. So this, of course, is going to reflect back on that look at Takamaru and the rules he lives by. Something we haven't mentioned but fits into this is Shoma's allergy to violence. The big sort of objective takeaway from this first half that still feels very introductory to me, even after all this time, is that characters can make decisions that affect the world in ways other than just, oh, if I push something off a table, it's going to fall. It presents this grander, sort of thematic change to the world that changes, you know, the tone of the space they exist in. Of course,
that's literally every fucking story.
The player make the most decisions that have the strongest narrative effect, but that doesn't mean that it's an impossibility for the actors within 100 Lines play to also do this. And the question we're, of course, running with here is, what is 100 Line trying to say by providing this avenue for interpretation?
War is bad.
And it's going to be a long time before...
Can't he just use the stupid, like, tail for
we
this?
even consider
Why does he keep trying to do the helicopter jump? It doesn't work.
Or what kind of conclusions there even possibly could be from something so metatextual.
Because the helicopter thing is not giving him air.
Just like
why is he keep trying to do it?
There's definitely thematic and narrative weight, but it's going to take a long time before anyone's ready to draw conclusions, especially me. I mean, look at the runtime of what
we're in the intermission section of the story.
Things are just about to get a lot more dense. For the most part, there's going to be a lot less of that sort of summary stuff like I did about the gear parasites. On that topic of gear parasites, their crazy reproductive cycle, we talk about that in terms of how it relates to 100 Line, sort of like that backwards and forwards, time travel stuff, like
not really.
All these, one generation has to get sort of completely left behind before the next can start, which sort of plays into Hiroko's relationship with the cursed cycle. But what's been avoided here is how 100 Line sort of plays and works with sex. There's a lot of that. Again, it's something that we don't get to talk about, skipping over Ava for the most part here. But also, you know, Cult of Takumi has a big focus on it. It's really just sort of tied to that war and colonial stuff. Again, we sort of broached the topic talking about Kurara there, and her sort of relationship with sex as sort of this crass, crude, brutish act that she sort of forces upon the others, namely Kyoshika and Takumi. Very interesting character. It feels like I'm really underselling Kyoshika by just going, she's really mean and classist, when, like, it's
You're
very
not underselling
grounded
fucking
in
Kyoshika.
understanding of how we look at colonialism and class. You know, it's
Well, yeah, he didn't bother editing. The point, this is an ad hoc section. I'm not blaming him for rambling. That's the entire point of this section.
it harkens back to my high school days reading Heart of Darkness and such. If we want to be
Kyosho really does remind
critical
me of
of
Heart
the
of
past 2
Darkness.
hours of content, I'm really underselling
The
quality
horror.
of writing of
The
Roland
horror.
Hundred Line. But I think especially regarding the women I've talked about for the most part. I do Darami a good service, but Hiroko and Kurara, geez, I sound like an arsehole. Hiroko is a great character, especially like I love Kurara. She's got a great dynamic with Gaku, who's my all-time favorite. But Hiroko is a very interesting character. We'll get to come back and talk about her later because we're going to talk about the steady fundamental route in great depth in the future.
10 years.
It feels sort of blatantly disrespectful of me to go, she was kind of lying during all those Bond events. Because it's not that she's lying, it's all just half-truths that contradict her
Oh,
actions.
goddamn. You
across
can get
slasher
some of them back
route,
in this?
killing
Why
game
am I not
route.
playing
For
Tokobot right
Hiroko
now?
to say it's like, oh yeah, I want to sire many offspring, but I don't care for raising them, only to sit there and coddle and nurture Darami through the killing game route. You know, there's clearly some level of contradiction that 100 Line wants us to recognize.
The question, here's another point, because again, he doesn't seem to acknowledge the fact that the routes are written by different people. Who wrote the Bond events? Who wrote the Bond events, then? Did the people who write the Bond events also write Killing Game? And are they in the same room and making sure the characters line up?
And inspect regarding Hiroko's sort of relationship with things like excitement, thrills versus mundanity. It's part of why Hiroko dies in the killing game route. The end goal that we're going to be talking about when we look at Tsubasa is that sort of mundane peace. And, you know, Hiroko's sort of denial of that means that she does have to sort of be removed from the story for that conclusion to be reached by the rules we've established so far. Maybe we haven't fully established that yet. It'll come more into fruition when we talk about Ima and, like, the sort of relationship he has with Kako and how they sort of end up clashing. And of course, the Veshness section will also help create this, like,
for those?
when two sort of opposing desires meet, what happens. I'm sorry, I'm spoiling everything. We're not gonna
You're
get there
fucked.
organically.
You're not fucking modeling
I've
curls in
almost
your
spoken
fucking
for 10 minutes here. Jeez, let's
primitive
let's
art
wrap up.
style,
Let's do
Vice.
just a very
It's not
quick,
happening.
Short summary of what we've done over the past 2 hours with no evidence. You'll have to go back and watch it if you don't believe me. 100 Line turns the act of making a decision into less of a literal choice and more of a thematic choice, and then emphasizes this idea by having it work for characters
How far
in the
are
story
we?
too.
Oh
But they
god,
also
we're
get
almost
access
2
to
hours.
sort of
Oh
subconscious,
fucking hell.
their own biases reflect in the world, not only that they perceive around them.
How long is this
but that
section?
literally
Okay,
exists
we're
for
gonna
everyone
we're
to
gonna do
see
the
as
Ito
well.
bit,
Now
and
it's
then I'm
time to talk
fucking
about
done
Peter
for now.
Outsky.
And we'll do the rest of
Everyone
it next
raise your
stream.
hands, clap. What
That's
an
a good
awesome
break
guy.
point.
If
Fucking
you're also
hell.
legally allowed to sort of hit me if you see me, and I didn't do a cool flashy intro for his showing up here. I mean, if I went all out for the Redstone route, I gotta go all out for Ader Alski, right? Anyway, enjoy.
Alright, welcome back to the pain.
Revolting. Nasty, bile-stained, rotted, gutted, horrible, disgusting, revolting. Stomach
Wait.
churning,
Okay, wait, he had the gay
horrible,
sex scene.
Disgusting, revolting.
Oh, he did. I think he censored it slightly, but he put in the gay scene. Why didn't he put that in Cult of the Kumi?
Churning, nauseating, vile. What a filthy, degenerate, putrid, foul.
Why is the audio so low? Oh, that's a Switch version.
The origins of Ater Outsky's evil is another factor muddied by 100 Line's conspiracy route. Ater's perception issues that cause him to perceive humans with all his senses as repulsive is supposedly a bug held over from the artificial memories transplanted in his body during the creation of the SDU. Yet this fails to accurately determine why Ato's entire backstory seems dedicated to him hating humanity as a whole. Perhaps his parents dying could be overwritten to have Ato be their murderers, but this fails to account for Ato's distaste of humanity that comes from his avid pursuit of historical literature. The argument could be made that Ato's perception issues were implanted by the holdout faction attempting to stop and rescue the SDU, introduced in the conspiracy route. But
that's a huge fucking leap of logic. That's a huge fucking leap of logic. That's supposed to be, like, that conspiracy guys who only appear in one route and are not acknowledged anywhere else. They obviously programmed Ito wrong as a countermeasure. Again, this is just the cost of having all their fucking memories be artificial. Because, again, like, fucking Durhamy's father beat her.
Their red envelopes instead paint the narrative of each member's backstory being real, if changed to grant greater motivation for the SDU to fight. From this direction, Ato remains an impenetrable barrier. Let's instead approach Ato from his desires outside of the total end of humanity. After escaping confinement in second scenario routes, Ato teams up with Veshnes, fighting alongside Paragon of Harmony Zentar to create several clones of Outski that create both physical and mental struggle for the SDU. Ato also teams up with Veshnes in the Box of Blessings route and Kako G in the Killing Game route, stretching his team player muscles further by rejoining the team in Steady Fundamental as well as Second Scenario after the truth is revealed. Ato never truly works alone, an idea that directly guides into Ato's desire for community. While timeline hopping in Steady Fundamental, one version of Ato offhandedly suggests to Hideko and Takumi that he wouldn't have minded working with them if he didn't view them as sensory nightmares. This being an important part of Ato should have been obvious from the facade he puts up in the original 100 Days. Ato's obsession with friendship and teamwork during his facade is reflected in the genuine strategist and organizational roles he plays in routes where he returns to the SDU, such as Cult of Takumi in Second Scenario.
Yeah, I was gonna bring out
This idea is further drilled into players' heads by Ato serving
also
as
coming
the
of
final
age.
boss of the shonen-styled coming-of-age route, where a supercharged Ato cannot compete with the power of the SDU's bonds. Bonds being something Ato severely lacks in this route and cannot comprehend. Ato's isolation holds such significant power over him that he's willing to give up his sense of sight and smell to cooperate with the SDU during the second scenario. This desperation explains why Ato, regardless of understanding of the ongoing future and human conflict, immediately joins the enemy's side when leaving the SDU. It's not simply because it's the most direct path to seeing humanity fall, but because it also offers Ato a community he could physically stand to be a part of. The capstone of this concept lies on the Goodbye Ato route. If the player still isn't convinced of Ato's change of heart after he tears his eyes out and burns his olfactory nerves off in a show to the SDU that he is willing to fight for them in second scenario, the perspective shifts to Ato as he departs the school blinded and carrying an Undying Flames bomb. Resting after days of travel in the second-to-last defense academy, we watch Ato bond with a group of Futuran children who take refuge at the abandoned school with him. Attacked by a wandering group of mindless invader drones that roam the wastes in 100 Lines board game segment, Ato fends off the monsters long enough for the children to escape before detonating the Undying Flames bomb he took at Sire's request. Before his demise, we get insight into an artificial memory Sire planted into Ato's head. Ato requested a handful of happy memories with the members of the SDU. We witness a version of the pool party CG potentially previously seen in alternative routes. This time, Ato is present. We can further understand Ato's struggle with isolation to exist beyond a need for community, but extend into a strong desire for interpersonal relationships. 100 Lines Multiple Atos route explores this idea in depth, where killing Ato after the aforementioned Zentar fight results in Ato's cryptoglobin remaining separate inside Takumi's body.
But only in that circumstance, and not in the entire second half of the fucking game, where he sucks off Ito twice.
Ato a modicum of control and space to exist within Takumi's mind. Ato warps Takumi's perception to make everyone look exactly like Ato Outski, altering Takumi's perception of their speech as well to mentally torment him. Sumino is offered one way out by his captor. Again, find the mysterious additional Ato and kill them, Only then will Eito stop taking over Takumi's body and allow himself to die. The game is impossible to win. Any strategy Takumi devises, Eito is prepared for and uses his modicum of physical control over Takumi to halt. The only outcome that results in Takumi maintaining control over his body leaves Eito in control of his perception, forever warping it to make Takumi appear as Eito to himself, and leaving Eito ready to provide commentary to drag Sumino down and suffering with him. The point of the game to Eito was never competition. His desire was to hear Takumi admit that Eito had won. 100 Line makes the choice between Takumi saying, "I lost," and "you won," a significant narrative decision that has adverse effects on Eito's reaction, despite the phrases sharing near identical meanings. Eito could have easily made this competition entirely impossible for the sake of taking over Takumi's body and destroying the TRC. Yet the multiple Eitos route makes it incredibly clear that Aotsuki's primary desire, once finding himself in these circumstances, was to break Takumi Sumino's will, creating a task that seemed possible, not so Takumi would relinquish control, but so that he would relinquish control in a way that was gratifying to Eito. Eito makes it clear the outcome where Takumi doesn't kill all his friends is his preferred one in this sense, even if he doesn't explicitly state it. What does this all have to do with Eito's desire for interpersonal relationships? Eito's relationship with Takumi is invariably complex. The way that Sumino converses with and perceives Eito in his slice-of-life daydreams within 100 Line's casual route shows that this is a two-way street. Let's jump to Eito's final line in the final battle of Second Scenario. Before each member of the SDU dies during this battle, they receive one last chance to speak. With this, Eito says, "Farewell, Takumi. You know, until the very end, I loathed, despised, hated, and deeply loved you." The yearning Eito has for the interpersonal does not rest in the superficial friend zone. Eito longs to advance his complex, nuanced, and layered relationship with Takumi Sumino, yet is consistently stunted by his own repulsion of the human form. Beyond any large moral statement, Eito's goals lie in the self and his immediate surroundings first. So where does this leave Eito regarding the concept of metatools? We have by now well established that character beliefs and values rippling into the world of 100 Line is a narrative fact of the story, and these metatools are the method by which 100 Line's characters are granted agency over their own lives. Given Eito's massive narrative presence in comparison to alternate major antagonist Veshnes, who appears only at the end of 100 Line's first route and often disappears for tens of days in concurrent ones, it should stand to reason that Eito utilizes metatools to a major degree. It could be argued that 100 Line's whole premise is formed from Eito's worldview. Eito's disgust for humanity, as a backstory, predates the events of 100 Line and informs the history of humanity's attempt to violently colonize Futurum. But Eito's effects on the world extend far beyond this. It's an understatement to suggest that Eito Aotsuki haunts the 100 Line routes that spawn from his death. Killing Eito on day 2 invites violence and suffering to the world of 100 Line, because the player has determined that they are willing to punish Eito for a crime he has yet to commit. And if the player is comfortable
The problem with this is, like, one, the idea was that, at least in my interpretation was, it's obvious that killing Ito was the wrong choice because the game wants you to spare people no matter what. Because it's not like a deep, complicated narrative. It is, you're not allowed to actually kill someone who was literally in the process of killing Sirei. Like, it's not like he committed a crime he was about to commit. He was literally 1 second away from swinging the fucking scythe down. It's not even like committing a crime. It was attempted murder at that point. And it's like trying to like the game treating it like, oh, Ito hadn't done anything yet is just like it's like fuck off. Like it's not like a Minority Report. Like he literally had the gun and was pointing it at him with intentions of shooting. But obviously I guess the idea is like, yeah, killing Ito has to be bad because you're not allowed to actually exert vengeance and violence to people without being punished for it. That's just how fucking Japanese JRPGs work.
Punishing Eito for a crime they didn't commit, then they have no right to be upset at 100 Line punishing them for a crime they didn't commit.
That's I don't agree with that at all, though. You could say absorbing his hero anima is wrong, but your only choice was to suck him or not.
We play with the nature of time relative to Ato's crime. 100 Line alternatively determines that instead of future not mattering, fiction does not, and hands the player the consequences of killing a fictional non-criminal. 100 Line's bloodiest routes. Slasher, and more significantly, killing game and mystery.
But ignoring comedy, which is also in this route, but this goes against your theming, so you're just not going to bring up comedy.
The primary mystery of the mystery route is a series of murder mysteries. While the route's overall kill count is much lower than its siblings of Slasher and Killing Game, and its connections to Steady Fundamental even lead to one of 100 Line's few everyone lives endings, its focus on murder still centers it around death in the same way that its contemporaries do, further compounded by Mystery Route introducing the live or mortis codes that present a red herring avenue for escape that only appear on the corpses of SDU members unable to be revived.
It's almost like that entire plot that was completely arbitrary and didn't amount to anything. But again, he doesn't see this as like the actual game. He sees this as everything having to have meaning. When it's clearly just a fucking red herring meant to give weight to the multiple routes that didn't fucking have any.
The second murder mystery is the murder of Shoma Genzaki. Imprisoned in the courtyard for murdering cargo in the first killing exclusive to the mystery route. The second locked room murder in a row, a series of objects and mechanical features of the courtyard are used to deduce that Ava killed Shoma without unlocking the cage Shoma was kept in by flooding the room and lifting the ceiling attached cage.
Yeah, he technically he's right, because the idea like you're not allowed to analyze things as the writer interprets it. I disagree with that, because how the writer interprets it shapes the story. I don't really like Deathly Ever has a purpose, because if the writer gives you an interpretation you don't like, you can ignore it. And that's generally what people like. I think that's what people usually complain about with Death of the Author. But for me, like, a story is shaped by the person who writes it. And I'm not going to drop that because a guy wants to write a 5-hour analysis video.
Off the floor. Ato Outsky uses this exact same method to escape his cell in the lead up to Steady Fundamental and Romance.
Which again, he's gonna act like that was written because they already made one fucking Danganronpa style escape little thing and they just recycled it, despite how arbitrary it was.
This method is simple and involves innocuous enough objects that it might have just been repeated as a cute nod.
No, it required 100 balloons and flooding the fucking room!
In the ceiling attached cage off the floor object mystery route. The second locked room murder in a row, a series of objects and mechanical features of the courtyard are used to deduce that Ava killed Shoma without unlocking the cage Shoma was kept in by flooding the room and lifting the ceiling attached cage off
with
the floor.
100 balloons!
Ato Outsky uses this exact same method to escape his cell in the lead up to Steady Fundamental and Romance. This method is simple and involves enough
Okay, I'm gonna let him finish. This better be a joke.
Innocuous enough objects that it might have just been repeated as a cute nod. What about the Killing Game route?
No, he actually is unironically trying to imply generating 100 balloons and then tricking someone to turning off the safety for the water system and then turning on the water system to the point the entire room floods is just like, it's just like, yeah, I think that's a casual thing that can be used with normal tools, like 100 balloons.
From the Box of Calamity timeline takes over as sponsor after the Gear-infected Kako, who has served as sponsor before, is killed by the SDU. Even in routes where Ato is killed on the second day, he manages to find relevance to these stories despite being dead. To an extent beyond haunting the narrative, even. Takumi's obsession with Ato that forms through his experiences during his first 100 days with the SDU stops Ato from needing to infect his mind literally, as in multiple Atos, to warp the story around him and his views. Ato even explicitly takes extra care to torment Takumi from behind the sponsor's mask in the Killing Game route, actively and exclusively tormenting him in a way that expresses the same desire for deep interpersonal relationships that Hundred Line explores in multiple Eitos. Eito's narrative manifestation beyond Hundred Line's first playthrough is intertwined with Takumi Samino in a way that transcends traditional understandings of platonic and romantic bonds, an idea that makes sense when considering the reflections that define the similarities between the two rivals. Takumi, beyond his first Day 100, is constantly struggling to grapple with the ways that his actions both bring together and tear apart the Special Defense Unit, an idea that the Cult of Takumi route centralizes around, and that Takumi struggles to mediate with the incredibly strict time allocations he must handle in the steady fundamental route. Eito's death leads to permanent and constant rifts between the group in killing game, slasher, and mystery routes, and builds to the combative and confrontational comedy that permeates the comedy route. The affection analyzer Takumi receives in certain comedy paths only tears apart his relationship with Nozomi, and the development of a disease that causes Takumi to spontaneously combust when annoyed by the slapstick antics of the other SDU members leads to him isolating himself from the increasingly flanderized cast. Eito's penchant for both secretly creating and then directly helping solve complications in the first route ties Takumi's perception and understanding of Eito to the maintaining of healthy group dynamics to such an extent that even after his betrayal, Takumi's depth of understanding of their association with Eito causes them to fail to exist with any meaningful strength in Eito's absence. This concept also serves to function as Eito's desire to be part of a social group, failing to manifest in routes he doesn't exist in. The SDU only truly uniting in the killing game route after Eito returns to the story as the second sponsor and is unmasked before his untimely demise. And what of deep interpersonal bonds on these routes? These too find themselves absent alongside Eito. Beyond the aforementioned comedy route punchline of Nozomi's affection reading 0 for Takumi, their relationship fails to meaningfully progress as a result of Takumi's gear infection in the slasher route, leading to Nozomi either dying or killing Takumi herself. Hideko and Darumi's relationship is cut short in the killing game route by Hideko's death fighting a commander outside of school grounds during the Invader Hunt's early stages, and the mysterious unnamed individual that forced Shoma to kill Kako on the mystery route leaves Ima personally estranged from the group by removing his source of stability and personal lifeline in Kako. Eito's return also marks the movement of Tsubasa and Takumi's relationship on the killing game route into more explicit romantic territory, alongside Nozomi's formation of a strong maternal bond with Ava and a strong sororal bond with her daughter Commune, serving as another set of blatant examples of Eito's return to the narrative, bringing his associated...
I don't agree with this. I feel like this is just, like, narrative convenience. Like, Eito coming back, causing all this to happen, I feel like this is just a coincidence more than actually justified. That Eito appearing as the second sponsor was conveniently the reason why everything changed. When the people couldn't even tell there were two separate sponsors for the most part. Like, it's just, I don't agree with this assessment. I feel like this is just, like, arbitrary.
Concepts back when viewing 100 Line through the lens of these meta tools. The notable exception to this rule on the slasher route is actually further supporting evidence through its nature as an outside creation. The emotionally vulnerable moments Hideko and Takumi share at the end of the slasher route were formed by outside pieces. Hideko's addition of the saw and leap suit to the slasher route serve as her writing the tale that creates this moment branded into her memory, an act of narrative agency above the passive permeating consequences of Eito's absence. We're extracting an excessive amount of information from routes where Eito is dead and absent from day 2. So let's take a look at another route where Eito dies. We've already discussed the Boxes of Blessings routes relative to what it does for Gaku's character, how we can understand Gaku's confided feelings in Takumi, and how they reflect what happens to him in the comedy route. During the route, both the commanders and the SDU are searching for the Boxes of Blessings, and Eito is assisting the Futuran commanders in their search. The search for these boxes leads the SDU to a plethora of discoveries that expand their understanding of their world and situation, including the pseudoscience behind cryptoglobin and the bizarre similarities between the cultural history of Futurum and Earth. Eito's quest for the boxes involved him discovering these truths too. The two parties searching symmetrically leads to opportunities for Ato to obfuscate the boxes and findings from the SDU, something he supposedly does at a mansion by the coast. In the Killing Game route, it is revealed by Ato that underneath this massive house is the machine where Futurans are turned into the cannon fodder monsters the SDU faces throughout each defensive battle. This fact remains unrevealed to the SDU in the Boxes of Blessings route. Yet, there is some unsaid truth Ato discovers that leads to him ending his own life in this very mansion in front of Takumi and co. Ato's constant subterfuge across this route, hiding pieces of information that can be found on alternate Box of Blessings paths, implies this information is in some way related to the writings of the human scientists whose notes are scattered through the city. Ato spouts some vague musings about control and freedom before his death here, claiming he doesn't intend to serve as anyone's puppet, which raises more questions about the information garnered here. Ato is already acting against the interests of the SDU, and therefore humanity, so is this information he received really related to the SDU's origins? Ato's choice to side with the SDU and seek...
There's a good notice here that he literally doesn't have an answer. And instead of bringing up that, hey, there is no answer to this, he just, like, plays it off like not having an answer is not resolving this beat in any capacity is completely fucking normal. It should not be brought up as a fucking problem with this fucking game.
Camaraderie with them in second scenario suggests that Ato struggles with the idea that his distaste for humanity, intentional or not, was artificially manufactured, and in an attempt to regain a lost sense of control, does everything in his power to reject the origin he's been given. By the time he finds this out in the isolated environment of a trader in Box of Blessings, the only out is death. This reading of Ato remains true even if Ato didn't discover the SDU's origins in the mansion, as we see his confirmed reaction to this information in second scenario. How does Ato react to the other secrets of the mansion? After taking over as sponsor of the...
Counterpoint, he may not have even figured out that information in the mansion second scenario, because, again, it's hard to be sure what, if anything, is actually consistent between fucking routes. It's possible that any information he would have learned would have been straight from the, straight from the fucking, the commanders in Veshness instead. Like, the idea of, like, you can't guarantee he actually went to that mansion of a route, because continuity's all over the fucking place in this game. You can't assume this shit, because it's, like, the game constantly retcons stuff between routes, constantly, because they're all written by different fucking people. And some people just get facts consistently fucking wrong.
Invader hunt and the
like, again, like how Box of Blessings seems to not even acknowledge that the fucking missiles exist. That's something he's not going to bring up in this video, is the fact that, remember how Box of Blessings just didn't even know about the raising? Because all of the endings imply the missiles were never fired, and I don't think they ever bring up Shion once in Box of Blessings. And there's never any acknowledgement of the fucking missiles going off in Box of Blessings at all. So, like, you can't make assumptions on what's on one route and what's on another, because, again, they're written by different fucking people, and they're not always on the same fucking page.
Game, following Kakuji's death, a now solitary Ato guides Takumi Samino and his team to the mansion in search of the few remaining invaders that will grant Samino and co. the points required to save the low-score Tsubasa. Through this, Takumi's crew discover the previously noted origins of the invader foes faced in every defensive battle. If Outski's discovery in Box of Blessings is the same as this one in Killing Game, why the different reaction? Ato justifies
Because it was written by a different person.
his misanthropic worldview through a historical lens, judging humanity's morality through their long and storied past of atrocities and despicable acts. Killing Game Ato acts alone and is comfortable using this reveal to further his agenda by pushing Takumi into a position where he must kill future and civilians, yet to be turned into invaders, and must face the reality that these are the monsters he's been mindlessly slaughtering the entire route. Meanwhile, in the Box of Blessings, Ato instead works with the Futuran army and discovers their own atrocity, enforced by Veshness's iron will. alongside Blessing's allusions to the distinct and bizarrely common similarities in human and Futuran culture, denoting an explicit exception for war and conflict. Ato is forced to grapple with the fact that humans and Futurans are not all that different. A history of relative peace does not mean they are incapable of acts just as immoral as the people of Earth. And recognizing that he's been duped into serving yet another ruthless dictator, Ato cannot cope with the realization that neither side is free of moral culpability. Ato avoids falling into the practiced both sides are evil by rooting his distaste in destruction of selfish moral superiority, taking the easy way out of his impossible dilemma when presented with no support networks.
Okay.
What thematic conclusions can we draw
That's
from
a way to
this?
spin the
So far,
fact that
character
routes are in by
analysis has
different
served
fucking
to provide
people and just do
evidence
different
for the
things with
thematic
it.
patterns of Hundred Line, and establish a set of narrative meta-tools that the characters within the world have at their disposal, unconscious or otherwise, to manifest their desires into the story in the same way the player does by making their own decisions, both in terms of literal narrative consequences and the establishing of removal of certain themes and concepts. With Ato, we started by looking at how he interacts with these meta tools, both as an active antagonist and as a thematic force, physically present or otherwise, and then used these as a method through which to analyze his character's desires and motives beyond the facade of a manipulative schema. Through this, we found that elements of the Ato exist in the pretend-friendly Ato, beyond his return to form when rejoining the SDU in Second Coming round, which is marked by an uptick in degrading human language alongside the more traditional manner of speech Ato took on during a majority of the first 100 days. These elements of Ato's character are so integral to his being that their thematic counterparts struggle to survive in routes where he is dead, and the routes that devote themselves to dissecting Outski focus near entirely on Ato's relationships with community and deep interpersonal bonds. Ato's understanding of these meta-laws of Hundred Line's world don't supersede the other SDU members, yet the death of characters such as Kyoshika and Takamaru seem to result in the addition of more themes as opposed to the destruction of them. Is Hundred Line determining that Ato does hold more narrative weight? It's a bit more advanced than Ato being more important than other characters. Instead, Ato provides us with the most prolific viewpoint into a passive approach to the framework we interpret Hundred Line
Are we
through,
almost done yet?
and how
Almost.
others' perceptions of Ato are just as important as to what themes come and go with him as his own thoughts and feelings.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm fucking tapping out here, but I don't agree with this because I feel like at this point you're just like he's trying to say right now is Ito's entire existence warps the entire story around him. In any route that he's not there, the story is worse because his mere existence warps reality into like a better position. I'm not entirely. I'm being very disingenuous. I'm being very hyperbolic against him on this, but that's how it comes across. Just trying to sit here and listen to him. That he's trying to act like Ito's existence, his mere existence warps the entire reality of the setting. Even if he's not there, reality is warped negatively just because him being there just makes everyone happier, even if they're not even like interacting with him. I feel like this is trying way too fucking hard for, again, all these stories written by different fucking people. So they have different vibes, and they're not the same fucking story with the same singular vision. Like, I don't.
This is most directly apparent in Takumi's rejections of Ato, in the killing of him on day 2, killing of him on day 57, or rejecting of his return on day 82, where Hundred Line begins to revolve around Ato, or tell stories that are thematically tied to what Ato represents from Takumi.
Again, like, anytime Ato's taken out of the story, everything has to be around. I don't agree with this. I really don't. Again, I just played for the fucking game. I'm not, like, super trying to make a deep narrative analysis of the game I played. Like, again, like, if you're spending months of your life fucking trying to, like, derive meaning from this game, then maybe, yeah, this all lines up to you. But it's like, this comes across as fucking crazy.
Takumi's perception and the absence of those ideas in the story. The implications of the associations others make with a character influencing the direction of narratives draws us to
And
question
I
the absolute
don't
nature
really,
of
at this
expression
point, his
and
whole
perception,
narrative
returning
weight
us
thing,
again to characters like Darumi, whose
like his whole narrative tool, his meta tools thing, I think that falls completely flat for me. Like how he's trying to like position this and trying to write like the story is being warped by the characters as like a new concept, or how he's specifically warping the story deliberately as he travels between timelines. It's like I don't agree with that at all. I really don't. I feel like this is just trying to derive meaning where there is none.
outward personas occasionally let slip to reveal more grounded identities. This idea is even further.
I will pause one more second. I do agree with I do like the idea that he, like, as much as he hates humanity, he's programmed to hate humanity, he is determined, he is, like, he feels, like, forced to be with others and stuff like that. He still feels compelled for community. That's something I didn't really catch as well outside of, like, the end of the main route. You could definitely kind of feel that, especially if Goodbye Ito, you could feel that. I didn't really feel that in the rest of the game, especially since, you know, he exists in Killing Game, and that version of him, again, written by a completely different person, doesn't embody that at all. But I do like that interpretation that he's like he is, as much as he hates, as much as, you know, hates Bonds, he is still, like, tied to them more than he wants to admit. Let's finish this fucking setup.
Further reflected in the way Ito's condition functions and spawns his worldview. Ito first perceives humans as unsightly creatures before he delves into the world of history. From a perspective following Ito's chronology, he first perceives humans as monsters, and the stories he reads reflects the facts afterwards. Then, only after this, does Ito's lived narrative within Hundred Line continue to be a result of his understanding of humanity being manifested into his reality. Ito's discovery of the truth and escape from servitude through death in the Box of Blessings morphs into a fruitless attempt to escape the way that perceptions of himself
he kind of just
by
completely
others
gave up trying
shape
to
the
do
world
footage
and
at all.
story around him. His removal of his senses in second scenario becomes a rejection of the worldview given to him by someone else. An active choice to question the perceptions that create his world and repent for his actions and betrayal of the SDU by leaving behind his ability to perceive, define, and hence alter the SDU's experience in a recognition of his own inability to change this fate. Ito's suicide becomes a struggle to both throw away his own meta tools that he cannot control, while simultaneously protecting him from the same tools being used on him. The Special Defense Unit looking to Takumi as a leader that will keep them alive emboldens his defining desire to protect, an idea taken to its extreme as we've examined in Cult of Takumi. Shoma betrays his own pessimism by the resolute stubbornness with which he approaches avoiding combat during the first 100 days. Combined with Takamaru's belief in Shoma's ability for growth, Takumi's recognition of the strength of the character in this act of refusal, and his willingness to enter a physical confrontation with Kurara Osazuki results in Shoma's ability to grow from his small stature into a ridiculously muscular figure after only a couple days of training.
Almost like it was a
Outside
joke.
perceptions of Shoma's strength allow for this otherwise unfeasible gag to exist in the world of Hundred Line, each giving it a level of narrative and character weight in how Shoma's continued perseverance in his match against Kurara reiterates the elements of Shoma's nature to the rest of the otherwise unaware SDU. Eito Aotsuki illuminates the explicit and important role of perception and how it relates to these metatools that we approach Hundred Line with in the passive. Can the game's other antagonists enlighten us to the active? Hundred Line's method of slowly growing its team size.
Okay, I'm done for now. I'm calling it for now. We still have we're about halfway. We're about halfway done. The next stream would be the rest of this. We'll start at the Saminos, and then you go to the rest. Dear fucking God. I don't know if I want... This is gonna be rough. Like, this is a lot rough. This was not what I was expecting doing this analysis video. This was not what I was expecting. This is both better and worse than I was expecting combined. And this is both. I mean, at this point, what's I've already played this game for 160 hours. What's another 2.5 hours? What's another 2.5 hours, Metroid? Okay, so fucking hell. And I said I'm done for right now though. But the next stream will be, I might do tomorrow just to get this, unless someone wants to stream tomorrow night, I might just do tomorrow to get this over with. So I can start Code Vein 2 on Friday. It'll just depend if someone else wants to stream tomorrow night. If not, then if someone doesn't want to stream tomorrow night, if someone does want to stream tomorrow night, then I will do this on probably the Saturday. I'll finish this. But anyway, go to fucking bed.